$100, they better take it.
We filed ours a way long time ago.
I've ever owed money, so we weren't as excited as usual to file. It's kind of funny how that happens. The New Hanover County Policy Committee meeting to order. I will call the roll. Ms. Crable.
Here.
Mr. Wildebohr. Mr. Wildebohr, are you here?
I see him as muted.
Yes, I was. I'm sorry. Yes, I am here.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you. And I am here. A quorum is present. So at this time, I'd like to move on to item 2, approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Approve the agenda. Yes. Motion. Stephanie.
Second, Pete Wildebohr.
Okay. Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Crable,
Yay.
how do you vote?
Yay.
And I also vote yay. I will move on to item 3, approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Yay.
Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, our favorite item, the update from the NCSBA. Just a couple of things before we start. You know, I'm just as guilty of this as anybody. You know, I think, can end up what-ifing these policies to death. And, you know, we really need to move through this 4,000 series. And to that end, I decided, you know, I thought it'd be a good idea to do what we do in our board meetings, which was, you know, sort of have our discussion, but limit our discussion to the practical and the possible. Ms. McKenna, Ms. Osborne, do you know how many policies we have after this? Can you just ballpark that for me?
You're about halfway done.
We're about halfway done.
What does that mean in numbers?
150 more.
Okay. 150 to go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Approximately.
we can do it.
Let's get her done.
We can. So I'm gonna, you know, we'll see how it works today. Hopefully we can get through more policies than we did last time, and then we can, if this works well, we can continue doing that as we move through our next set of series. But I think the 4,000 series is probably the one that will generate the most discussion. So I'm excited to put that behind us and have Ms. Osborne send us some new policies from a brand new series at our next meeting. So with that, let's just dive right in. Policy 4125, tuition for discretionary admissions. I'll ask the board members for comment, but otherwise, if we want Ms. Farnham to begin, I always think that's best.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Farnham.
Good morning, everyone. How are we doing?
Good.
Good. How are you this morning?
Good, thank you. I do not have any comments or suggestions on this policy. I think we discussed before utilizing the local per pupil allocation, but that is written in, so I don't have any comments on this one.
I just want to make sure that I'm reading section 1, number 5 correct. So basically, if a child starts the year at New Hanover High School, they can remain at New Hanover High School tuition free, even if their parents move to Brunswick County, correct? Is that the way this is read?
Section 1 or
Yeah.
oh, the first part. Okay.
Yeah, number 5 down there. I just want to make sure that we actually have a situation coming up right now that I've been made aware of that actually talks right about this, and about a child staying at one of the high schools, even if the parents may not be in. So that is correct.
It does say it may be waived.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, I got you. Okay.
So to follow up on that is if it may be waived, is there a process that they go through to consider the waiving?
Yes, I'm not sure exactly who would own that process. But I think with approval of the policy, that process would have to be created. I don't know if anybody else, any other senior staffer, or if Dr. Faust is on, if we have another response to that question.
I think Dr. Faust may still be at the power breakfast.
So we would create that process then. I don't know if Dr. Smith wants to add in.
I'm not sure. But I would agree that I think the process would be created by the district.
Mhm.
Okay, so how do we follow up on that? Or we just approve the policy and then hope that you guys are going to do that, or that's on somebody's list somewhere that we have to do?
Well, that's been consistent with our other processes.
Okay.
We've been building the infrastructure behind the policies in anticipation of the policy being passed and being approved. So yes, this would be created immediately. And my recommendation to Dr. Faust would be that we use this criteria that's listed here in the policy 1 through 6 to determine if the tuition would be waived. Quite honestly, we would probably follow much of the guidance of the hardship guidelines to determine appropriateness.
Okay. So the question I had that I had last time on the same policy that we had some questions about was, where does CTEC fall into this? Since we don't have an approved MOU with them. So I thought that was one of the reasons that we sent this back, is that we still had some discussion around CTEC. For Pender County students.
That is true. That is true. Ms. Stagner, do you want to give an update on that, or would you like for me to share what we know from conversations with Pender County schools?
To unmute myself. If you want to go ahead, I mean, that's fine. If
Okay.
I mean, the short answer is there is no agreement in place with Pender County schools to accept students. And so for CTEC, and it does not appear that there will be an agreement in place. And so those students from Pender County who want to attend CTEC will have to go through the discretionary admission process.
So that is way news to me. So when was that decided, or is there still discussion about that? Or is that not a part of this policy? Because that to me is a big, huge issue.
Well, it doesn't really have to do with the policy, Ms. Crable, but we can certainly talk about that.
Separately? Okay.
Well, and I can add in that New Hanover County Schools Administration and Ms. Stagner have all attempted to have an agreement created,
Okay.
but it is not the desire of Pender County Schools at this time to have an agreement. So what's been communicated to us in writing is that any student that from Pender County Schools that wants to enroll within New Hanover County Schools specifically for CTEC, that they can apply, and then they have to seek release from Pender County Schools, much like students who attend other districts who live in New Hanover County have to seek approval for release. So we have, of course, we understand the intent of the creation of CTEC, and we have not discussed any tuition requirements for students that would attend CTEC from Pender County Schools. And I'll just speak from my opinion, which is only an opinion. I don't foresee us considering tuition for that, because the intent of the program was to be a blended model for students in Pender and New Hanover, and funding was aligned that way. So I don't think that applies to this policy, but I realize that's new information. We've been trying to get that resolved.
Okay, so I will just pursue that elsewhere. Well, and one other thing, I'm the the CTEC Advisory Council Board Rep. So this is kind of like an important issue, but if we can still manage it around outside of this policy, then I'm good.
There
Well-
you wouldn't want to list it as number 7 under this.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you, Mary Hazel. I was just going to say, I don't know that that fits into any of the existing categories to waive tuition. And so you might want to add that if there's still a desire, even in the absence of an agreement between the Pender County Board and the New Hanover County Board, if there's a desire to waive tuition for students at CTEC, then I think it should be added, because I don't think it's covered by any of the existing exceptions.
Okay, well,
I would agree.
I would like to add it, and then we can work towards whatever we need to work towards. But if we don't put it in there, then we have nothing to say about it if somebody complains, or, not complains, but, files a complaint or there's an issue. So can we add that in with whatever wording we need to add, Deborah and McKenna?
I would recommend that it go under the bottom section where no tuition will be charged, instead of the section of may.
Okay. Gotcha. So that would be like a number
Or
4. Yeah, all these strikeouts. Okay. Okay.
What would you like it to say?
Well, what does it say?
Students, I would say students accepted, students accepted, do we want to be specific with Pender County Schools?
Well, I don't think we need all of
Yes,
them.
I think so.
Or,
Well, I think that, so what I might suggest is students accepted into whatever you call the high school, is it?
Southeastern Area Technical High School.
Right, but are there going to be other schools like that? So a joint, or whatever the language is,
Cooperative
Not at-
Integrated High School.
cooperative.
Right.
But you don't want to, I guess, you don't want to be too broad if that might also include your early colleges.
Right. This is the only one that is a cooperative area, high school. So I really feel like it should say students accepted into Southeast Area Technical High School.
Yeah.
But again, that the intent of that program was to be a collaboration between Pender and New Hanover. It didn't include other counties. So I'm thinking we should say students accepted from Pender County Schools into Southeast Area Technical High School.
Would other students from other counties be eligible to be accepted?
No.
Okay. So that's what I was thinking. If they're not eligible to be accepted, then anyone who was accepted would be from Pender County or New Hanover County. So it would be redundant to include. I mean, you could,
But I
Okay.
wonder if we don't want to put that wording in so that somebody from Brunswick doesn't come up and say, well, I want to go to that school. And, all of a sudden your policy says I can't, I mean, right now, every time we say anything in a policy, we have 1,500 eyes looking upon it. So I think honestly, saying Pender may be redundant, but I would say we want to do that so we don't open ourselves up from somebody coming from Onslow or Brunswick saying, but your policy says I can come, I want to come.
And the name of the school sounds more regional than it really is. It was just
Right.
limited to those 2 counties in the legislation.
Yeah. So yeah, I say let's put it in for now, because we can always,
Yep.
just
True.
cover ourselves. And
I
then,
second that.
thank you, Pete. So I have one last question, Mary Hazel. Does in the second section where it says, in addition, no tuition will be charged to students of full-time school system employees, are long-term subs, are they considered full-time or not considered full? They're still considered part-time?
They are, just, they're the three categories. So, full-time is, over 30 hours, full benefits. And we have part-time, that aren't considered permanent, those less than 20 hours. And then we have that group in the middle, 20 to 30, who are part-time with partial benefits. So this is only those people who work at least 30 hours in a full, permanent capacity.
So do we have any long-term subs that would work 30
You
plus
could
hours?
have a long-term sub that could be hired for more than 6 months that this would qualify for this.
Okay,
So
so
it's not the job as much it is how they were employed. If they were
Okay.
employed for a year, they would qualify.
so is that something we need to spell out, or we like that this is sort of a benefit for a long-term sub as well?
Deborah's making a face. Deborah, do you agree or am I incorrect with if we contract with a long-term sub for 8 months, would they qualify?
I completely agree. And I think that you don't have to spell that out for subs. I mean, it would be, if they meet the criteria of the number of hours worked and the length of time worked.
But they would never know they're eligible for that, right? Unless somebody told them.
They
You
know
could
they're full-time because they get insurance and other things. So,
Okay,
All right.
And
that's it.
that's the difference between 1 in the second section and 6 in the first section, correct? That the ones that are, maybe subs or whatever, they might have their tuition waived. And then the next section, the ones that are full-time will have them. That's correct?
well, that's interesting. Yeah.
But you have it there twice. And I'm wondering if the one above is talking about what Stephanie's talking about right here.
Yes,
Okay.
that is my
Okay.
understanding as well.
So does it need to be one or the other? I feel like those are inconsistent now that you pointed it out.
Yeah, that's that. And I think that's another reason why this policy got sent back, because we got sort of bogged down in the two different categories.
So I don't think it's confusing, personally. I think the top one allows that there may be a waiver if the parent is employed, and what we could say is in some capacity by the school system, but no tuition will be charged if they are students of full-time school system employees. So
That's-
it makes sense to me. I don't know if that helps.
I agree.
Okay, I'm good with that.
And again, I think that would be part of your process for requesting a waiver of tuition would be some information about whether they're full-time or part-time or how they're employed.
Okay.
Okay, so are we okay to move 4125 forward for first reading with the amended language?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Am I wrong? But is it 41? It's 4135, correct?
Yeah, 4135.
Yes.
Okay.
So what did I say? 25?
25. That's okay. Go on now.
It's early.
Hey, I know. I got you.
All right, moving on. 4220 student insurance programs. Ones that are on here for 5 minutes, I believe, are covered under general statute. So really didn't see much here, but Ms. Farnham, if you want to lead this conversation.
Yeah, I don't have any comments for this one.
I got it.
It's
My
straightforward.
question I think I asked last time, but I want to ask it again. Is, the athletic injury insurance, it starts in 7th grade, but our 6th graders are able to play. So why is that?
I didn't know 6th graders were eligible to play, so it may.
Yeah, they've changed
are.
that. They changed that about 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's a good question.
Thank you. I'm awake this morning. I had my energy drink.
It was on my list too, Pete, because 6th graders can play
The only sport that they're unable to play is
football.
Football.
So can we
So
change
is there,
that?
in-
And we're insuring them, so I think we should probably change it.
Okay. Thank you. Good catch, Pete.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I.
And
Okay.
then I just had a question on all that wording at the very bottom that we took out. Why did we take all that out? Because it sounds kind of pertinent.
I'm not sure about that.
McKenna may have done that for a reason.
That was just part of our policy that didn't seem to align with what your old policy said, but you can add it back in if you want.
Well, I mean, take a look at it and see if I'm off base, because this group insurance is not really, are we talking about just sports? Because in the statement, it said to participate in programs that have a higher risk of physical injury than most school activities. And then it says offsite internships, football, that counts. So why would an offsite internship need athletic injury insurance? But maybe that's what you're saying. And it says, certain school field trips, we want to require accident insurance. So
McKenna said the language that's been struck is language consistent with the State Board Association's policy.
Correct.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and add it back in then.
Okay.
And we do provide that insurance for CTE program purchases that insurance for.
yeah, and
Ms.
that's
Coble,
why I
you wanna
brought it
just
up.
go ahead and
That's
add
what I
that
thought.
back in.
I mean, I certainly think that you can add it back in, and I'm not sure why it would have been struck, because it's not covered. I mean, an internship program would not be covered by your current policy of athletic insurance. I would put it in not included in the same paragraph, but add it back in.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm fine with that. Ms. Crable, you okay with that?
I am, yes.
Mr. Waldebor, you good with that?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, yep. So 4220 student insurance program is good for first reading with the amended changes.
And I would clarify, I think it does need to be a separate paragraph.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. Communicable diseases. Boy, have we talked about these enough for the last 10 years. But let's go ahead and talk about the policy that covers them. It is, again, under general statute. Ms. Barnum?
Yes, and this also aligns with the school health program manual created by Public Health and DPI, along with DHHS at the state level. So I don't have any comments on this one.
So is there a reason that they keep talking in this throughout this policy that we talk only about, AIDS and HIV and hepatitis when we're not talking about pandemic kind of diseases?
So not being a health professional, but often pretending to be one, evidently, that is, those are a different level of communicable disease. And so I really can't explain how that's different or how it's, separated out and why, but I know that that is consistent with the school health program manual that's based on general statute.
Okay. So I went back to try and find the policy from a long time ago. We talked about this on the policy committee. This is how long ago it was, because I was on it. About the H1N1 virus in that pandemic era. So does this align with that, or is that a separate policy that the crisis management team just dealt with?
No, this would apply. So let me.
I'm just wondering if we need any language in there that talks about pandemic situations. I mean, hopefully we're not going to have this again, but we all said that back in H1N1, and that wasn't even really bad.
Ms. Crable, I would say no. And the reason is because each pandemic would probably be a unique situation. And I just don't think the New Hanover County Board of Education needs to put anything in writing about how we behave during pandemics.
I mean,
Well, and Deborah, I'm sure or McKenna can speak more to this, but general statute speaks specifically to communicable disease. So Deborah, do you want to add in?
Well, I think that, again, my recollection is that the statutes are all, when AIDS and HIV were really just coming into, there was a lot of concern about it in schools, and there was not as much understanding and knowledge scientifically about it. There were a lot of changes to the statute and specific references dealing with HIV/AIDS. And so that hasn't been done to my knowledge with the coronavirus. But I would say in this policy, if you look at under section E, it is the very specific for AIDS, HIV, or hepatitis B. But then under section F, it says students with communicable diseases other than AIDS or HIV. So that would really cover, it's a very short section, but that would cover those other communicable diseases like H1N1 or coronavirus.
Okay.
And then that does cross-reference to General Statute 130A-145. While it doesn't fall into our 115C series for public schools, it aligns with the quarantine and isolation authority of the state health director and therefore the local health directors. So I think it's completely consistent with our actions now.
Okay.
Mr. Waldebor?
In section D1, where it says we have to report that to the county health department, does that, for us, the school system, mean, can that mean telling the school nurse to meet that requirement?
Because our school nurses are public
Right.
health employees, and that is our arrangement within our MOU, yes.
Okay. And then have we approved policy 7260 already? Where it says under precautions?
No, I don't believe you have. McKenna could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've gotten to the 7,000 series yet.
Well, I have a problem then if we're referring to a policy that we haven't approved.
And I'll let McKenna explain that, but that's unfortunately par for the course with these, since you're
Right.
only going through one section at a time.
Yeah, it happens. There's really not a good way to address that other than people, if that policy has not been adopted yet, they can look on the correlation table and see what it correlates to. And so your old policy would still be in effect. And so they could reference the old policy that correlates to it until you adopt the new policy.
Can we not put in our old policy number there and then we just amend this when we get there? Because I do not want to approve any policy that refers to something that we haven't approved. This is back to the 4,300 thing again.
Yeah, I think, well, the 4,300 thing was in the same series. I would say that would be far too tedious and just unnecessary, because, you know, if somebody's that dedicated, they will see that policy hasn't been passed and we have the correlation table.
Then we need to say something in there about the correlation table, because I don't want to leave it into the hands of it. You're far too dedicated. It's either we're doing it or we're not. And that's kind of what our policies are supposed to be. So people know what's happening.
I mean, Ms. Stagner, is there any legal issue with citing a policy that hasn't been passed yet? I mean, as we go through all these, because I'm sure this will happen on a number of other policies.
Well, and it has already happened. I mean, there are already
happened, right.
There are policies, and so when you pull up the initial site for the Board of Education and it has the policy, you go to the landing page, I think it's called, and it talks about new policy manual, old policy manual. It has a correlation table there. There's really no other way. I mean, there's so many policies cross-referenced in other policies that to try to replace those with existing policies and then go back and scrub them all and include the new ones, I would be very concerned that you would miss some when you got to the new policy and approve it. So, and this will all be updated hopefully by the end of the year, and then you'll be set. So it's not really a legal issue, but I do think it's a practical and really a potentially problematic issue if you aren't able to catch all the cross references and change them now and then change them back again after the policies are completed.
Well, if I'm remembering correctly, you advised us not to accept any of the ones in the 4,300 series until we had passed 4,300.
Because those were all part of the same new policy series. They were all interlinked because they built the other policies in the 4,300 series built on 4,300 itself. And so you really couldn't, they had to be adopted as a package because they all go together. these are not that sort of integrated system of policies like the discipline policies were. Certainly if the policy committee and the board want to go and change all the cross references, it's certainly within your ability to do that. But it's going to take some more time, and McKenna's potentially, the ones you've already adopted, you may need to go back and change those as well.
Well, I think at the
McKenna,
end,
McKenna, you've done this a number of times. Have you ever done anything like that? Or do you just usually pass? I mean, have you ever heard of anything like that?
No, nobody's ever done that.
well,
I mean, I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's a much bigger, I think we're creating a very big problem to solve a very small one, would be my objection.
Well, we don't have to talk about it anymore. I'm just going on the record is that I don't like referencing policies that we don't have. And I don't think it's a good practice to do that. And somebody's going to have to be responsible for this at the end to go back and double check on what we did and to double check our cross-referencing. So if we just want to wait and do it then that's fine with me. But that's just my thoughts. We don't need to hold it up, the discussion anymore, but that's just my thoughts. And you'll see that in some other policies. I'm going to say it again.
Okay, so do we want to push it forward?
You and Pete decide. I don't, unless we change the policy that we're referencing.
Yeah, I do think we need to push it forward.
I agree. I think that's good. Let's push it forward and keep up with that correlation table and then come back and make any changes we might need to later.
Okay, so
One last question for Julie. It's in the next paragraph. When it says, unless students should not be involved in the cleanup of any potentially infectious materials, unless students have been specifically trained in the handling of such materials. When would we ever require a student to do this cleanup?
So we would not necessarily require a student to do this cleanup, but there are times where we have student interns working job shadowing and working in preparation for, as we talked about, our internships moving into custodial positions. So sometimes we train our students to do that, but it's pretty rare. We would train them to do that, but I can't imagine that we would have situations where they're cleaning it up.
I would almost rather say that students they can job shadow and they can watch all they want, but that's one of those things that if you were in a public work setting and you were an adult and you hadn't been trained, I don't think that we should be allowing students to clean up at all, even if they've been trained.
And there may be some correlation to CTE courses such as health occupations or allied health programs that have this as a part of the curriculum as well.
Okay. All right, I can do it.
Okay. All right, so 4230, communicable diseases, is on for first reading. Moving on to our next policy, policy 4240, also covered under general statute, child abuse and related threats to child safety.
So McKenna, you provided us a new version from the original draft.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us the change in the new?
It was just to align with the law with the reporting stuff. I think it was in the last section. Let me pull it up.
Was it about the training section?
The statutes changed, I believe it was last year, to expand the reporting requirement.
Yeah, that was what the change was.
So now there's an obligation of any person to report, and there are some other changes as well to those reporting statutes. So I assume, McKenna, this is the most recent and incorporates all those new recent changes.
Yes, the updated version I sent includes the new changes. And it just with what you're required to do.
Perfect.
I had just a quick question in section A, or throughout the whole thing, but section A is where I can bring that off. And it says, the volunteer knows or reasonably should know that a child. How are we training volunteers? That's my question. Are we training volunteers? Hopefully we are, but since we're requiring the volunteers to do this, if somebody comes to my school and is going to volunteer to read to first graders or something, how is that? What processes do we have in place at this time to train the volunteers?
So they're legally required to report when they know or reasonably should know. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we are training them, but we do have a training program that can be used for those. So we have level 1 volunteer and level 2 volunteer. Level 2 might be working without supervision. So they may be more like chaperones. They may be assisting in the classroom, doing reading groups, that kind of thing. But any of our staff and volunteers our staff are required to participate in the 2-hour training, and we can have that available to volunteers as well. But this just says that the volunteer is legally required to report, and that's consistent with what McKenna and Deborah were talking about with the changes to mandatory reporting, because it's not just related to school employees, it's related to any person who has knowledge or should have knowledge, and they have to report. So I think that just makes it consistent with general statute, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're training them to be able to identify.
Well,
does that help?
Yeah, it does help, but my concern is the fact that, now since we have general statute saying that they have to, how do they know that? I mean, unless you're going to say that you're every volunteer, well, make sure you read the whole policy. They're not going to do that. If Mr. Jones wants to, or Miss Smith wants to come to whatever school and wants to volunteer, I think we need to, as you said before, I think we need to have the infrastructure behind the policy to, let them know that just let when you're by state, by state statute. Now, if you hear anything, you need to make sure you report it. I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah, and Mr. Wildebohr, I think it's very wise to have certain policies provided to volunteers so that they understand their obligations, and whether there's some training that goes along with it, the more the better, I certainly think. But in actuality, every person in the state, every person walking down the street has an obligation to report, whether they're affiliated with the schools or not. So there's nothing unique about school volunteers now. I mean, this has just been a very expanded effort to broaden the pool of people that are obligated to report. But I certainly agree that as a proactive measure and a risk management measure, and just for a general good practices measure, to have a set of policies that when someone comes to volunteer, they're said, these policies apply to you. You should read them, be familiar with them. And if there's training available, that's even better.
Perfect.
Are we?
And just
I have
so
a question.
I'm sorry.
I have a question. Sorry. Do we have a volunteer coordinator for
For the school system? It has been managed, Dr. Faust, through the communications department, and the all hands on
Yes, for the
deck
school
committee-
system.
Yes, the all hands on deck committee that is sort of stagnant right now. That is a group that is working on that volunteer handbook. I was very active in that from the PTA council point of view. And through the crisis management team, Tanya Jordan has agreed to train the PTA council and invited guests, which means PTOs and any other parent support organization, to deal with that, because that came up last year as an outreach of the Title IX committee. So yes, there are plans, we just haven't done it.
And I'm wondering, I'm just going to throw my idea out. We did something like this at North Topsail, where there was a person that was assigned to do it, and the people that she had to meet with. And even if we don't, in today's Zoom world, I mean, even if we did an hour training that before you can volunteer level 1 or level 2, maybe even having more training for level 2, put it on Zoom.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great idea.
Right.
Well, we are working that the all hands on
so
deck
I
committee
was
doing that.
So I think, I mean, when I think about a volunteer coordinator, I'm thinking of someone who's employed by the school district, who, as Mr. Wildebohr was stating would actually, if you're going to volunteer, you sign up, it goes to this person's office, and these are the dates of the training, and these are the mandatory trainings that you can do before you get clearance to go into the building.
And
I
I
like that.
think, Dr. Faust, that it was a joint effort. Stephanie Markley is the one who is the owner of the volunteer handbook, and that she's the one that checks off people for tier 1 versus tier 2 when they sign up online and they have to pay their money, to be a volunteer. And then it was the communications office that is the one that sort of tracked volunteer hours, through the school. And each school site is supposed to have a volunteer coordinator that trains 2 times a year, one at the beginning of the year and one in the halfway through, any volunteers that come through. And so I've been through that at several different schools, but that is really loosey-goosey.
I think that's a great idea. I think that's something that we should definitely pursue. I don't think we need to hold this policy to
No.
pursue it, but I definitely think that that's something we should look into over the next several months, over the summer especially. We could put something together.
So another question I had is, do we need to in here cross-reference with the Title IX policy and mention Epic 360? I'm looking specifically at paragraph 1, 2, 3, where it says when we're talking about victims of certain offenses and crimes, do we need to make a cross-reference in there anywhere that we have this available through our school system? And then like, how do people actually report? Because it just says must report information immediately. It doesn't really say. I mean, do we want to be the reporting clearinghouse, or do we want to have them go to law enforcement? I think we should say something about that, because it says in letter D that you will go to law enforcement, but only really if we're suspecting that the parent is the person doing the crimes.
So, Ms. Craybill, under the heading for A is that certain crimes must be reported to law, because the reporting statute has different places that you have to report to. So certain crimes have to be reported to law enforcement, certain crimes have to be reported to DSS or DHHS. And so I would be very concerned if someone felt like sending a note to Ethics 360 satisfied the reporting requirement, because it doesn't, and it puts a burden then on someone to capture that and understand through Ethics 360 what has happened and what needs to be done.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay, so everybody good?
Just one last thing, in letter F, where it says about the training programs, do we need, when it says the school system will provide the training, I'm just wondering, and it mentions grooming process, and I know we're talking about some of that kind of stuff. Do we need to say that not the school system, but the superintendent or the superintendent designee, Julie Varnum, not name, but assistant superintendent for student support services, will ensure that this training goes on? I would rather it be more specific that we say than just the school system, because that's a really get lost in the cracker.
And we already do that. So of course, I think that would be fine, because we maintain the logs for Darkness to Light, which is our training program.
Right. So should we put some wording in about that to just keep consistency? That's where it's all housed?
Yep, let's go ahead and change it. I would.
What would you like it to say?
The superintendent or designee,
Okay.
please.
And if we want, I mean, I know in some other policies we've looked at, we've actually said the assistant superintendent for student support services, like when the homeless things and we've actually designated that office as the clearinghouse for this. So that's what I was just wondering if we wanted to do the same.
We can. Yeah, that's fine.
And Julie's saying, nodding her head. She's not saying it out loud, but the,
That's fine.
Okay.
Yes, I'm already doing it, so that's fine
Right.
if that's identified that way.
okay.
So the assistant superintendent for support services, is that what your title is?
Student support,
Student support.
student
okay.
support. Mhm.
All right. So are you good with 42? Is everybody good with 4240 for first reading?
Yep.
Excellent. All right, policy 4250, North Carolina Address Confidentiality Program, Ms. Barnum.
I'm gonna say this one's pretty straightforward, written in alignment with general statute. So I don't have any comments on this one.
And neither do I.
Guess
was
what?
fine.
Neither do I.
It's funny. All right,
Move it on up.
policy, what's that?
I said, move it on up.
Moving on up. That was a quick one. We beat our 5-minute goal.
There you
Student,
go.
student sex offender 4260, Ms. Barnum.
Again, I think we've worked out any kinks with this one from prior an earlier draft. I don't have any further comments on this one.
Okay. And neither did I.
I just have just a point of clarification for me so I understand this policy better. So up in section A, where it tells us that these students are expressly prohibited from knowingly being present on the property and owned and operated by the school system, and it names all the places. And then it says, except to the extent the student is permitted on school property to receive services. So, and then we go down to we go down into later in the policy where it says that they are allowed to be on campus. So I'm just confused. Like, are student sex offenders allowed on campus with supervision, without supervision, or not at all? It just seems like we're allowing it, but we're not really controlling it.
So you could have a student who would be on campus to receive special, who has special needs, who has related services, and by law, we have to provide those services for them. So that's where it would be supervised and it would be on campus.
But so do we want our policy to say that they must be supervised at all times? Because it does say that in the next paragraph, that he or she will be supervised at all times, but in the first paragraph, it doesn't say that. So I was just hoping that we could get a little tighter in all of our areas, that we say the same thing over and over.
Well, and again, how I would read this is the first paragraph A is the broad prohibition. So if you fit this category, you are not allowed on school property except to receive educational services. And then under B are the conditions under which students who are sex offenders may receive educational services. And in that it says must be supervised by school personnel at all time. So I do think it's
okay. So that's in number 4, right?
B4.
Yes.
Okay.
So if a student sex offender is on school property for educational services, then everything under B is going to come into effect.
Right.
A just says that unless you're getting educational services, you're not allowed to be on school property.
And this policy doesn't state it, but I was wondering if we needed to. You know how if there is an adult that is a sex offender, they have to register somewhere. Do student sex offenders have to register somewhere? And
I think that would, so they are registered, and I think that happens through, if it's a student, that happens through the court system, and so we wouldn't make that determination on whether they have to register.
so if in fact they do have to register, and they are in our schools, do we have to notify parents and students at that school that they have a sex offender in their midst?
Yeah, that would be a violation of purple law, I believe.
Well, why is it
So-
not a violation if I'm an adult and I have to register and I have to tell all the neighbors that live around me that I'm a sex offender?
So Ms. Colonel,
Because you're an adult.
I haven't, I mean, my understanding, and again, I haven't studied this issue closely, but that any student who would be registered as a sex offender, they would be registered on the North Carolina State Registry, just like an adult would be. If it is a juvenile, they would not be a registered sex offender. They may have committed a sexual offense, but they would be adjudicated as a juvenile. And so this policy is talking about those individuals who have been registered by the state of North Carolina as a sex offender, and their information is out there on the sex offender registry. I don't think the school district has an additional obligation to then disseminate that information more broadly. But I mean, I can certainly double check on that, but their name would be out there publicly like an adult registered offender.
Okay, so policy 5022, registered sex offenders, we haven't approved that one yet either. Correct?
No, we haven't approved, except for maybe one or two, we haven't approved anything past the 4,000 series.
Okay, so just on record, we're referring to a policy that we don't have.
Yes.
Yes, that you'll get that one in the next section of policies.
Okay,
Oh, good.
all right, that's it.
Okay. So we are moving 4260 student sex offenders on for first reading. Our next policy is concussion and head injuries. I know this is a very important one. Ms. Farnham, do you want Mr. O'Brien to take this?
Either way, this is written based on general statute and state policy. So if Mr. O'Brien has comments he wants to add in.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie, and then I'll just chime in if I need to.
This is very straightforward with general statute. So I don't have any additional comments. This is in relation to the amendments from 2011. And we have the return to learn concussion protocol process that we follow. So I don't have any further comments on this one.
Julie, who conducts that return to learn? Is that the school athletic director or the school sports trainer?
Often it's a team that then pulls together. So it's kind of a process. Initially, the medical information may be gathered by an athletic director, but then based on the results or the content of the medical information or the characteristics, there's always there's a kind of a flow chart or a linear process for accepting the information, determining if a support team, like a multidisciplinary support team, needs to come together to support any kind of short-term accommodations needed for academics or any type of accommodations needed for medical response. And then sometimes you'll have the school psychologist involved, and especially if it moves on for a more significant head injury that would be considered a true traumatic brain injury, then of course you're looking at that potentially an evaluation process.
All right,
So
well, go ahead.
yeah, it kind of morphs into a team response depending upon the needs.
Well, I was looking more at paragraph E, about halfway down, where it says the superintendent shall arrange for information and professional development to be provided annually to all teachers and other school personnel on return to learn issues and concerns related to concussions. So I am wondering who is training all the teachers and other school personnel.
So we have a kind of a cohort, no, that's not, a compilation of annual trainings that are required by general statute or by policy.
Right.
And this is one of them that's provided every year to staff in the schools. So we do a kind of a summer institute for administrators, and we go through all of the beginning of the year trainings, and it's put together in one lump. And then school staff and principals present that to all of their staff. And then we, in my office, we collect an attestation from principals that all of the beginning of year training was completed and on what date to all their staff.
Okay.
And the concussion and head injury is included in that.
Okay. back up to paragraph 1, the last sentence where it says the superintendent is authorized to investigate the use of baseline testing for student athletes and require that student athletes undergo such testing. Is that anything that our district is working on?
We do not
Would it-
require that at this time.
Okay, is it anything that we're interested, that we're contemplating, or that's just out there that we can do it if we want to? Because it's optional. We don't have to put it in. It's an optional thing according to our correlation chart.
Yeah, so we have not discussed that, Ms. Craybill. That is certainly something we can have conversations about, but that is not something that we currently are doing at this point with student athletes.
Okay. In section B, is the training that all student athletes have to view the crash course concussion? Is that once per year, or is that once per athletic season?
It should be once per year, and that link and that information is provided by the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. It's shared with our athletic directors for them to use with the students, but also they should be utilizing it with their parents and parent meetings as well.
Correct. But they're usually like with the concussion. And I know this video is relatively new in the past couple years, since my kid was in school, and there was always some confusion as to how often you had to do the concussion form and the did you do it once a year or once a season? And so I was just curious if this one followed the same protocol.
So I can say that they upload their information. We have an electronic portal. All of this is uploaded and kept. And so it is, I can certainly get back to you on regarding, is it per season or once per year? I don't want to misspeak, so I would need to research that for you.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I mean, you can just let me know at another point in time. It's not going to hold up looking at this. And then the last thing on record keeping, the superintendent's annual report to the board on compliance with this. When might we expect to see that? Like, what is that in the middle of the year, end of the year, whenever we ask for it?
So Ms. Crable, I don't know that we have done that in the past year or so. So we would need to look into that as well. I do know that we are able to keep electronic records through the electronic portal where students are able to submit their physical form, their concussion form. And I know that the coaches, and it's an audit item for them as well, that they are to keep records of, the parental meetings and those sorts of things, and also professional development.
Okay, so at some point in this school year, it would not be out of bounds for us to ask for the superintendent to report to us that this has been done, how many people, how many schools, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would think so. We definitely have access to the information.
Okay. And again, policy 6140 is a policy that we don't have. So we're referring to a new policy that we don't have.
Okay.
Mr. O'Brien, I had a question about the concussion video. And although the rest of the policy does appear to apply to all student athletes, whether they're middle or high school, the concussion video is limited specifically to high school athletes. And I was wondering if, I know that those are the North Carolina High School Athletic Association rules, but is that something that you do show anyway to middle school athletes, or is there some thought that that should also be available to middle school athletes?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea that we do so. I can't say that that is something that has been regularly done at the middle school level, but that is certainly something that we can do.
Well, I'd like to propose then that we put that in there.
I
Put it in
agree.
our-
I
Put it
think
in
we
the
need,
policy.
yeah, I think we need to protect our middle school athletes as well as our high school athletes from just a wide variety of things, but this for sure.
Absolutely.
So
And
in
if you
that
see,
case,
it does say in that line that they see this video prior to each sports season. So if I'm a 3-sport athlete, I got to watch this video 3 times, according to this policy. So do we want to say we watch it once per year?
We should check what the high school rules.
So you, right, you need to comply with the High School Athletic
Right.
Association rules on how many times to watch it, but I don't think there's any reason you couldn't expand the pool of students who see that. It wouldn't be required by the association, but I personally think it would be a good idea to have all student athletes watch it.
Yeah, I would definitely concur with that. You know, you look at the fact that a middle school athlete can get a concussion just as well as a high school. So why would we not protect them? It makes no sense not to.
All right.
We put that wording in there.
Yes, please.
And
Yeah, should we,
how-
do you want it to just say all student athletes? We'll just get rid of the word high school.
Right.
Sounds
Well, I
good.
do think, I mean, we don't want to refer to the rules of the High School Athletic Association as well if this is something that is not required by them. But McKenna, I would say, so maybe take out that introductory clause and just say all student athletes, and then take out high school from the heading.
Okay. All right, so with those changes, I think we are good to move 4270 on for first reading.
And so, and we are going to get clarification if it has to be for each sports season or for once a year.
I'll take a look at the rules on that, Ms. Craybill.
Okay, thanks.
And I also just, while we were transitioning to this new policy, I pulled up the registration information. So there are some juveniles that are required to register as well, even if they're adjudicated juveniles. But I do think that that information, once they're registered, if they're adjudicated as an adult, they are required to be on the the registry just like an adult. If they're adjudicated as a juvenile, what I'm finding, just again on a very quick pulling up the statutes, it looks like it's not public information, and so I don't think that would be able to be shared under FERPA or under the rules protecting the confidentiality of juvenile offenders. There are some very specific, and I don't want to get into the weeds on this, circumstances under which law enforcement and schools can exchange information and share information about juveniles, but we can, get into that later. I don't think it's necessary for the policy. I just wanted to be sure that I was clear on what I was telling you all.
Yeah, and maybe that's more conversation later, because I know if my child, girl or boy, was at school with a sex offender, I would be really uncomfortable knowing that my child could interact with this person, in the hallway by himself or herself, or in the bathroom, or in the cab, or in the parking lot.
Well, again, and that's why the
Supervised.
supervision requirement is in there.
Okay. Thank you for
Okay.
checking on that, Deborah.
And for the high school handbook, rule 2.3.8 says all coaches, athletes, and parents are required to view the crash course concussion video prior to participation in each season.
Yep. So that we need to just clarify that at these sports meetings, that a multiple sport athlete has to do this twice, or it has to do it every time, even though we're only requiring our concussion form once. And so maybe we want to just make those align. I don't know, but
Okay, so are we good?
did you want to pipe in, Al?
Well,
No? Okay.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was trying to. Yeah, I've got that highlighted in the manual as well. So that has been a discussion with the athletic directors, but we will definitely clarify that needs to be done before each season based on the policy or based on the handbook.
Okay.
And obviously, we're going to have to add that in when you talk to, your middle school athletic directors too, because they probably haven't been doing it.
Will do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, policy 4400, attendance. It is on for 10 minutes. I would like to try to keep it to 15. I know it's an involved policy.
All right, can I jump in? I don't usually do a lot of talking,
Sure.
but I'm gonna, just from my own knowledge of things, I'm jumping way down to section B. We made a very good statement, a very important statement, but I don't know if we have any teeth for it. So, I mean, elementary, middle school students arriving late or requesting early departure must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. And if they're not, question mark, question mark. I mean, we, you know, at my old school, we had students sometimes, and of course we would follow up and call the parent, but we're not going to exclude the child from school. So, I mean, what, you know, what is the answer to, and if we're saying they must be accompanied by a parent or guardian, what if they're not?
How are they going to get to school? They can't drive.
Well, we had students that would come, you know, be pulled up, mom and dad, you know, I had one lady that would never get out of her car because she had her PJs on. And of course we did follow up, but we didn't exclude the child from school. So the child would walk up the front of the school, you know, and we, you know, allow the child to come in because that's the safe thing to do. The child would come in and where's mom or dad? Oh, they dropped me off and then took off, you know, and of course we followed up, but you know, it says here in our policy that they must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. I think we need to say, and if not, you know, the school administration would follow up with, I mean, we got to, this is exactly what it should say, but I mean, we have to say, I think we need to, you know, answer the question, and if they're not, you know, so that principal is not sitting there saying, well, according to policy, they have to be accompanied, this child's not accompanied. So now all of a sudden we're saying, what do you do with them? You know, do you exclude them? Hopefully that's not the answer. Do we, you know,
So
I guess.
I see what you're saying. Of course, we have other policies that say we're not, we're not going to exclude kids because,
Sure.
they're standing outside the door.
Right.
So I think if it's, I think it's at the discretion of the board if you want to put a statement in there about, administration will follow up with the parent to problem solve if this expectation is not met.
Yeah.
I think that would be consistent with some things next in that I want to bring up, if it's okay.
I think
Mr. Bowyer?
I think that's an excellent sentence. Administration will follow up if this expectation is not met. I think that's great.
So
Does that satisfy your concerns, Mr. Wildebohr?
Yes. Oh, that's perfect. That is perfect.
And then
just for the practice or the protocol of it, my hope would be, and that's only a hope, that if a child is dropped off, that we are accepting them and not making it, holding the kid hostage.
Yes.
Or disciplining the child for an adult issue.
Right.
So we'll take that literal. When you say that every child, if they arrive late, you know, of course, I always say that's how we would want, this sets the example of how we'd want them. But we also need to make sure that we're not holding kids hostage in the office and saying you're not going to go, you're going to go to in-school suspension because of.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yep.
Okay.
I get two more quick ones, and then I'm going to jump. Then I'll let everybody else talk. Section C, the new part that we've put in here: if a student fails to bring an excuse, the absence may be deemed unexcused. When would not be deemed unexcused? You know, I mean, it shouldn't. I think the word may be needs to be will be instead of maybe, because if a child doesn't have an excuse, I don't think we become, well, you said you was sick. Okay, we'll let it go. I mean, it needs to be.
I thought about that too, but I like having it kind of vague there because A, I like to give principals as much discretion as possible when it comes to these type of issues. But B, I mean, you know, God only knows what, kid could fall in mud 10 seconds before walking in the door, had to run back to the house to change. I mean, there's a million reasons why I wouldn't want it to say will be. And I'm sure as a principal, you would have somebody not bring an excuse and be like, okay, well, you know what? I got it. And there's just a million variables at play.
And there may be knowledge of the excuse, whether the child brings it or not.
Okay.
I'm just thinking, and what if it might be they have a chronic illness and you know that, and the parent didn't send in a note, but you're not going to deem it unexcused. If you might call the mom and ask, and she'll say, oh yeah, the kid was sick, and you will excuse it even if she doesn't write the note.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Fair. And my last,
And especially,
Go ahead.
okay.
No, you go.
Now, I was just going to mention, especially right now, we may have a student that's been exposed, and we are requiring that student to be, out of school, and they don't log on remotely. So that could be where we know we don't need a note for that one.
Okay. My last question is the next little section where an absence may be excused for any of the following reasons: personal illness, and I'm just comparing apples to apples. In Pender County, they actually have a section in there that talks about like a 3-time rule, that after the third, because otherwise you have a parent that, oh, Susie doesn't want to go to school today. Oh, she's sick. Susie doesn't want, and you can have, 25, times. So if a child is absent for 3 straight days, they actually have in their policy that you have to have a doctor's note or a, physician's note or or a PA or something. But I mean, I'm wondering if we don't want to, because otherwise we open that door that, you have a parent that, I actually had a parent like that she would write notes like every day because the child just didn't feel like going to school. And, but we had to excuse it because by policy, well, at least by this policy, we could, she could do 25 straight days that are personal notes, and, there's no recourse. So I'm wondering if we do want to add in, after 3 straight days of absence, we would require a doctor's note.
So the way the policy is written right now, it says absences due to extended illnesses may require a statement from a healthcare practitioner. And then also, if the next sentence says when the total absences exceeds 10 days per semester, further documentation may be required. Like, and in parentheses, it says healthcare practitioner statement, court documentation. But if you want to make it more specific about a 3-day rule, we could add it up there.
Well, I'm thinking
That only talks about high school kids too, if you look at it closely.
The second sentence, yes. The first,
No, in the blue, it says when
Mhm.
total absences for a high school student exceeds 10 days.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
the
my-
prior sentence applies to everyone though.
my concern here again is if we leave it, I mean, if a child's absent for 4 straight days, you have some kind of documentation. I mean, there's got to be something going on. I mean, if the way it's written right now, like I said, we could have that parent. Like I said, I had a parent that, and her excuse to me was, I'm not her parent, I'm her friend. Well, and she doesn't feel like coming today. And, it also starts to become a rolling stone, or escalates because the child misses 3, 4, 5, 6 days. Then they're so far behind that they don't want to go either, so it's not even, we do try to make an inviting atmosphere for children to come to, but after a while the child's so far behind, I don't want to go because I'm so far behind, and and then it just escalates. So I think setting some kind of a standard here of after a certain number of days, we do need other documentation, and
So
not leave
I do believe that we involve our social workers. Teacher makes the recommendation after they notice that there is absences, and just like those conversations that you were talking about, Mr. Wildeboer, they have those conversations with parents and checking in, and then our supervisors, our social workers do get involved. We also have attendance audits where we're looking at those, and we send out, to my understanding, we send out notices. So it's like, I know we do it with our tardies 3, 6 or something. They start at 3
3,
days.
6, and 10.
Okay,
Yep.
so we generate those, and so after X amount, and Julie can speak to what that number is, the social worker does get that number, and then those calls start to ensue, and then if it's a visitation to the home, so we get involved on that side.
So
But-
to consistent,
I was just going to throw in that, at least to my knowledge, the 3, 6, and 10-day letters are for unexcused absences. We're talking here about, if a parent writes a note, it would be an excused absence. So that, that they wouldn't have those letters generated, because if mom just keeps writing a personal note that Susie's sick again, so, so I don't think that, and I may be wrong because I'm thinking about Pender versus New Hanover, but in Pender County, those letters didn't go out unless they were unexcused absences.
so I would say that every note doesn't constitute an excused absence. So just because a note comes in, if there's concern, I'll tell you our practice. Our practice is at a pattern of absences related to anything. So if it's considered illness or injury, our school social worker is involved in a pattern, even if a doctor note, or not a doctor note, even if a parent note comes in every day, that's not sufficient for having absences one and after another. And so that's problem solved. And then based on the information provided back, the social worker either involves the nurse or they determine that a doctor note is necessary. So I think it would be very much in line with our practice and appropriate for compliance to say a pattern. So under number 1, a pattern of such absences will be monitored by the school social worker and may require consultation with the school nurse or a doctor or documentation from a healthcare provider.
You wanted to add that language under number 1?
I think it's consistent with what we do, and if it answers the concern.
Yeah, I think it's important to be consistent with our practices. Mr. Wildebohr, does that answer your concern?
That would be perfect. Again, thank you, Julie.
Do you want to add it there or in the paragraph above that says absences due to extended illness may also require a statement from a healthcare practitioner?
I do think it's important to I think it could go ahead, but it might not apply to all of these. So for patterns of, let's see, where did you mention extended illnesses? Yes, absences due to extended illnesses will be monitored by the school social worker and may also require a statement from a healthcare practitioner. How about that?
Could we say extended illnesses or injuries?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Due to injuries or extended, yes. I think make it consistent with number 1 below.
Okay, will be monitored by the school social worker and may also require a statement. So the rest of that sentence is fine. May also require a statement from a healthcare practitioner.
I just had a couple of things, if I might. I'm not sure why high school is in that next sentence, why it wouldn't be for all students and not just high school students.
That's why I asked.
Right. So I'd like to hear if there's a rationale for that. And the other thing, going back to, I think, Mr. Wildebohr's question about students leaving or returning with a parent must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. Policy 4210, which is release of students from school, which has to do with leaving with a parent. This just says students are not permitted to leave campus during the school day without permission. And I just wonder if you might want to make sure that that is consistent with departure from school under this policy as well. That they would have to be accompanied by a parent or guardian for elementary and middle school students.
I would support yes on that.
So, and I think the other one was written in general, maybe including high school. This one doesn't. But high school students don't require a parent or guardian for early departure.
Right.
And that's consistent with potentially their schedule within other places.
Right. And you're right, Julie, that just 4210 is broader. It just says all students, but I think it leaves some ambiguity where you say students may leave campus with permission. I think it would be helpful to clarify elementary and middle school students must be accompanied by a parent or guardian.
I would agree.
And and I mean, you kind of, that brings me to a question. So I just want to make sure that I am correct. That means if I write a note, Carly's dad, I write a note that my sister-in-law is picking her up today, that would not be honored because it says parent or guardian. And this is not, that person's not my child's parent or guardian, even though I've written a note. So
person on the list. Don't we have that in there that you have a person on the special checkout list?
Well, it says right here, parent or guardian.
No, I'm just saying that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. But I mean, our policy is not saying that. Our policy is saying it's got to be a parent or guardian. So if we put the policy out there, then I mean, it's got to, if we are honoring the notes or the list, then we should put that in this policy, not say only parent or guardian. I mean, that's my thought.
Well, yeah, or add in or responsible adult designated by parent or guardian.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. Boy,
Okay, where is that change?
Under B,
Uh-huh.
in the, on mine, it's still red. Yes, right there on the bottom of page 1. Must be accompanied by a parent or guardian or responsible adult designated by parent or guardian. And that would be consistent with our Power School records.
I would probably put designated in writing.
Okay.
Designated in writing, yes,
Mm,
by parent or guardian.
Good.
Thank you. And as soon as I have a couple of points after this one.
Okay, and
For good
then
McKenna.
Deborah, where was your change to policy 4210 or to this policy? I can't hear you.
4210, to add that same language about elementary and middle school students must be accompanied by a parent or guardian. It's that first sentence or first paragraph. I think that 4210 is on for first reading. It's gone to the board for first reading, or it may be going.
We're not doing first readings tonight. If it is on for first reading, it's on for the interim.
It's either gone for first reading or it's the next, it will be up for first reading next. So we could still have time to add that before the policy is approved.
Okay, so you want it to say that elementary and middle school students departing early must be accompanied by a parent, guardian, or responsible adult designated in writing by a parent or guardian?
I think so.
Yes. Okay, are we good, McKenna?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to bring to attention further down in section B. Well, we have it right there on the screen. Any disciplinary consequences for unexcused tardiness or unexcused early departures will be consistent with policy 4300. I have not considered in policy 4300 student behavior consequences for tardiness and early departure that would include suspension. That I find that to be counterintuitive. If we are wanting kids in school more and we're upset that they are late or absent, to give them a suspension as a consequence, I find highly inappropriate. I would recommend that be removed.
We need to strike that out. I was thinking the exact same thing.
And quite honestly, our problem-solving process around excessive tardiness and suspension falls more in line with the work of the social worker than in a disciplinary manner.
So are you saying we don't discipline at all? I mean, is there anything that would relate to 4300 in terms of disciplinary measures related to absences and tardiness, or do we just not discipline for it? Do we have other mitigating measures that we put into place?
So I hate to split hairs, but I think discipline is the word that I would be concerned about. I think that there would be some intervention needed for a student who is experiencing or is exhibiting a lack of attendance in school, whether it's excessive tardiness or absences. And I would say that would require some problem solving and interventions as opposed to disciplinary measures.
So why don't we just strike that then?
Strike what?
That sentence, any disciplinary consequences for unexcused tardiness, would, you know.
I'm curious if you're okay with striking the entire paragraph.
I would be, yeah, because all I highlighted there to
Sure.
talk about was why would we suspend people when we want them in school and we are using suspension as our last means of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm fine with striking that entire paragraph.
Okay, and then I'd like to move down to section F and do the
But
very
can we
same
put
thing.
words in? But can we put words in that, like that Julie said, as another as replacement words that
Sure.
you know, intervention strategies need to be employed, you know, with excessive.
We could,
words.
yes, something like unexcused patterns of unexcused tardiness and unexcused early departures from school or class will be monitored and problem solved by the school social worker.
Good.
Just a
Question.
question, do we leave that just with the school social worker, or can it
Right.
be the school social worker in, you know,
It can,
with the
it can be
administration?
listed as, right, it can be listed as student support staff within the school building to include the school social worker or something like that.
Okay, that, you know, that's fine. I just don't want to exclude the, you know, the principal, because, you know, they may be, or vice principal or whatever, they may be able to help out.
Right, right.
If, and this is just me thinking, if suspension is not an option by that policy, do we have to tell, that means that they have to do something different? Do we have to actually tell them what to do differently?
What do you mean?
When,
So and if we go back to that one, the paragraph that Julie was talking about, and the board, I'm not sure who's the driver of the screen.
not sure either.
Is it Kim?
It's driving me
Oh,
crazy.
it's probably Anita, yeah.
Right here, this is any disciplinary. If we remove that and we aren't that's not an option. My question was, do we now have to put in telling them what they have to do?
It's a part of, so I don't know that the answer is yes or no, but it's a part of the training and the protocols that we have within the work of our attendance monitoring and within the work of the school social worker, the counselor, the admin team. So if the answer needs to be yes, I would say that, and to include what Mr. Wildeboer was speaking of, any patterns of tardiness and unexcused absence will be problem solved by the school team to include administration, student support staff. And we can.
And the reason why I asked that question, Julie, maybe following with me, yesterday in our conversation, I was talking about how we train individuals. But do we, just because I don't train you on this particular thing, you can't infer with leadership that, hey, this would be an opportunity where this would apply, that this doesn't work. In that case, when people can't use, they can only use it in that box, I started to question leadership. Because if we have to say your social worker needs to get involved, guidance counselor needs to get involved, you need to have a conference with the parent, you need to do with this type of thing. It starts to question if it's not in there, or if they say we've done all that, we don't have any other choices. Are they then supposed to come back to the policy committee and we're supposed to say, well, you've got to add this, you got to add that. That's what I was going for. It wasn't, I was being a jackbutt or anything. I would use a nice version. We have company.
I was trying to follow I was trying to comply with the testing on this because I get your logic. So I would be concerned with putting too much information because this needs to be the broad stroke. We would need 100 pages in this section if we were going to talk about all the things that the school social worker, the administration, the counselor, the teacher, and other instructional support folks in the building are doing to encourage attendance. So I think it should be a broad stroke, or leave it to professional judgment that's aligned with their protocols that aren't included in policy and can't possibly be included in policy.
And Julie, if I could add, I think it might be important that even if we don't tell them what we want them to do, it might be necessary to at the very least tell them what we don't want them to do, which is, I think.
If we remove suspension, that's not an option.
Well, but again, if it's not explicitly said, it may be that folks think that that's an option because
I think that's called a conversation with Al and Jackie, where it sits down and say, tell me what the process is. Tell me if a student's not coming to school, why you felt compelled to suspend them from school. Because I believe we don't give enough credibility to some of our leaders where they need to. And of course, that's what we have Al and Jackie and those school supervisors in there for, when we recognize, what was the student suspended for? What's the policy? How do you use your social worker? How did you use your counselor in this one? And I believe, again, when we're training individuals, that's where we tease out these individual things, and we teach this through scenarios. And because we have to do better, but if we continuously tell them, do this, do that, we don't grow leaders. We have people who are just good with compliance. And they have to be better than good with compliance. They have to be able to think in those situations, what should I do in this situation? And I just disagree as the superintendent to say that we've got to give them. Yeah, I'll stop because I'll get on my soapbox. But I do believe the leaders.
I will. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I thought you were done. I was just going to mention that policy 4300 does, when it speaks to the behavior requirements and then consequences, attendance is not one of them. So if you're following policy 4300, you would not consider suspension for attendance or tardiness. So I think that kind of answers Dr. Smith's question, but I also agree, Dr. Faust.
I'm for taking out suspension, because we already said it's our last resort. And if we're throwing it in there, then that's not a last resort. It's like, I don't have time to deal with this right now. You're going home. And all we've done is reward the kid, for showing up late.
We're maintaining the behavior.
Right.
Of not being at school.
All
Right,
your
so you're rewarding
positive,
behavior.
restorative,
Right.
behavior changing kind of things.
Yep. So I would recommend as well that paragraph be removed from F, section F.
Okay, does everyone agree we're going to remove the paragraph from both section F and from section B?
Yes.
And in
Yes.
section B, it was replaced with patterns of unexcused late arrivals and early departures will be monitored and problem solved by the student support staff, including the school social worker.
We don't mind getting rid of kids according to these policies. Yeah, we had that conversation yesterday too.
I'm not okay with it.
And then section G, chronic absenteeism, it talks about how the school administrators are gonna use strategies for reducing absenteeism, which would be all the stuff that you're doing.
Yes.
Right. And that third line in that paragraph, when it says regular attendance must be prioritized within each school, does that mean that principals do it however they want with some coaching from our directors and whoever is their coach? Is that what that means? Not like everybody gets to kind of go rogue and say, I'm doing this, or I'm going to suspend, or I'm going to blah, blah, blah.
That's offered as a statement of reminder that there's an expectation that regular attendance is monitored and reviewed. As Dr. Faust mentioned, we will conduct attendance audits. We will conduct audits of your percentage of attendance at certain times in the school year. So I think it's just, and I'll let Dr. Faust or lean on Dr. Faust to add into that. I think it's just a statement of expectation.
Okay.
And I would say that I've seen situations where it's actually celebrated, where our attendance is going over blah blah blah, and go ahead.
I agree. I was actually getting ready to say that, looking next year how to celebrate attendance and actually saying who's in the top 10%, which schools are in the top 10% of the 90 plus club. Doing those things, because literally you can change behaviors by rewarding on the positive side.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's all there is to that.
Well, the only thing that I see, I'm a celebrator, you know that, but the back into section A, paragraph number 2, when it's listing how we take attendance during remote instruction, complete daily assignments, that doesn't mean you're attending, either online or offline, and or have the daily check-in. So I think if we're doing our attendance audit and people are recording attendance differently, we may not be comparing apples to apples.
And I I agree. I think during this time, it's difficult to measure. We have so much going on. That may be an exception to the rule of how they are taking attendance. I think these are in normal settings. What would it look like, in a normal school year?
But will we continue at all in our normal school year to have remote instruction days?
I don't. The only time I would think that we would do remote is if there is, of course, like a natural disaster due to weather, where we would have to. We still have devices, and granted, we would still have power that we could do it. I couldn't imagine us starting the school year like we're ending it next year. No, starting the school year next year like we're ending it this year.
So I was just curious if the DPI was having us, have remote options if you want to.
No, that has not been a conversation
Okay.
at all. We're preparing in all of our conversations to go back to open schools like they've started 2 years ago.
Okay, cool.
And all direction from DPI through any of the toolkits or the lighting our way forward is to be, during this time, to be flexible with attendance. And so I think this offers that flexibility and that professional judgment.
Okay. So I had a question in paragraph C, number 3, when it talks about who you get to be excused if somebody dies. I was just thinking that we might want to add child, because we do have young parents in our school that may lose a child.
I mean, we certainly can, but it says brothers and sisters.
No, it's not your brother. It's your child.
But
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, yeah,
but it
we
also,
certainly can.
yeah, it says, but it's not necessarily limited to.
Okay.
So I would say that those are probably very unique circumstances, and
We would just
can't see a situation where that would not be excused. Yes.
Okay. In section D, school-related activities, how come we have a special category number 5 for career and technical? I mean, I'm not opposed. I'm just wondering why that would not be a school-initiated or scheduled activity.
That may be, and I'm going to lean on McKenna or Deborah, that may be something that is specific in the federal regulations for CTE.
It could possibly be if they're doing internships.
Mm-hmm. That may be to meet a CTE regulation.
Okay. Okay, I can go with that. So going back and preparing for this meeting, you start reading the policy, you go, wait a minute, I just read that for the last time, but it really, it reinforces when you read again. But I was comparing this one to the last one we were presented, and it was different in a lot of different ways. And one of the big things that we took out was the part about 10 days. If you miss 10 days total in your, then you're going to fail the class. I mean, did we consciously take that out?
So that, I
I'm
think
glad
that goes back to that high school statement that's in C. The total absences for a high school student exceeding 10 days per semester. So I think that I can't recall the conversation, but I know that that's connected to that.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Yeah, assumed. But it's the same thing in letter H, number 3, where we're talking about absences may impact eligibility in participation in extracurriculars. Why only high school students are mentioned there? Why don't middle school kids or elementary school kids lose their extracurricular privileges if they are missing days?
I think it should possibly read secondary. I don't know, does elementary have the extracurricular?
They might have like Green Team Club or Girls on the Run Club or
I would
club.
support secondary. I really don't feel it's appropriate to hold a K through 5 student responsible.
I think it's more about the kind of the person in charge of getting to school. So for K-5, I mean, a K-5 kid really can't determine their own ability to get to school necessarily. So I would
And I
say,
would actually argue to keep it because I don't really think a 6-8
yeah.
can, I mean,
Middle school kids have clubs and they have sports.
yes,
And-
but I don't think they have the ability to get to school by themselves the way a high school kid might.
So is that where that
Sorry, that was my
Yes.
cat.
is coming from?
that's the behind the scenes logic on that.
So what if a principal says to a middle school kid, you've missed too many days of school and you can't participate in art club, you can't participate in science Olympiad or battle of the books, or you can't play on a sports team, you can't be a cheerleader. As
I
part
think
of their
if-
discipline, because we already said that that is a disciplinary thing listed in 4300. We've already said that you can take away extracurriculars.
But we have
but-
also said that absences and tardiness don't fall
Okay.
under disciplinary measures. They fall under interventions.
Okay.
Right.
Also have-
But that could also be an intervention if it's determined that the student is the one that is not cooperating with the parent, not attending school, and is kind of doing that on their own. Then I think that could be an intervention because you want to reinforce the student coming to school if it's of their own volition, and then reinforce their participation in extracurricular activities. But also sometimes the extracurricular activity is the way to get the kid into school.
So I think we're talking about something, but that's not what's on the screen.
Right. On the
No.
screen, it says high school students.
No, on my screen, it has D, school-related activities and.
Yeah, we need to scroll down.
Oh, wait, yeah, we need to scroll down.
Section
Sorry.
F.
I'm in section H3 or something like that. Keep going.
Okay,
Keep going. Right there. Stop. Okay.
Right there.
okay, now I can.
And I'm pointing at it, but you can't see me pointing at it. It's the second, it's the first paragraph. And it does reference 3620 extracurricular activities. So which applies to all students.
Well, and because it says may, it might be appropriate to identify it as secondary students, because it's not definitive. Again, we are working toward increasing the likelihood of
Getting them.
attendance and on time attendance. So I think in certain situations, it would be counterproductive to say, hey kid, I'm working with you on this attendance contract, and now you've missed too many, and the reinforcer that I was using, which is this certain club, you now can't participate in. I would, as a behaviorist, I would want to balance that to determine the best way I could increase that kid's attendance. And sometimes it might be to include them in an extracurricular activity. So it's not just about if you do this, then this happens, or if you don't do this, then this happens. It's about the function of the behavior.
And we can also get the, coaches and the sponsors involved so that it could be, I think, again, letting students know what you were just saying, we want to help support you. And sometimes, those activities get kids to come to school.
Right.
If you have a good coach working with you too, a lot of times that coach will take that child under his or her wing and really try to help them to see that, being in school is the primary thing and that the athletics is the secondary thing. But as you say, a lot of times that's the driving force for a child is their athletics. So I would agree 100%.
We all know that's how lacrosse started in New Hanover County schools as an after school intervention strategy.
True.
All right, I'm good. Thank you.
Do you want that to be secondary?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I would prefer it if we could write that. Just
That's fine as long as that may is. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. Well, that was closer to 50 minutes, but I knew attendance would take up some time. As will, I believe, our next one, although hopefully not quite as much because we still have a bunch to get through. So 4,400 will be on for first reading. The next policy up for discussion is policy 4,700, student records. Ms. Barnum.
And can I clarify, we did move concussion and head injury on further.
Yes.
Yes.
Everything's been moved. Okay. I did not use my marker. Student records. This is just a restatement of legal requirements. I don't have any, whoops, my page is not working. I don't have any suggestions on this one.
Julie, I do. I think, unless I am not looking at the most recent version, the changes that were made to deal with directory information in remote settings and video, I don't think those have been incorporated. So we revised policy 8700. And I don't think those changes have made it in here.
I was thinking they did, and I can't put my hands on it. I don't understand why I can't.
Can I ask a quick question while she's looking something up? This has nothing to do with changing the policy, but on number 8, at the very bottom where it says notification if the school system uses contractors, consultants, volunteers, or similar persons to perform official, certain school system services. I'm just wondering what the heck would a volunteer do when we're getting to student records? Because that's definitely off our list as volunteers to be involved in parent record or student records at all.
I would say that's in line with legal requirements, but
Yeah.
just like other things that we've got another policy coming up to revisit, just because it's in general statute or legal requirements doesn't mean it's something that we would do.
Yeah. Okay. Because we would never have a volunteer doing something that the school system would otherwise perform. Where school
So I mean, but I think that would be. It could be something even as basic as, taking attendance, because then you have the student's name and their class assignment. And so I think because the information that might be shared from student records might be things that and I don't know if your schools do this, but if a volunteer is helping to grade assignments for a teacher to check off that sort of thing. Anything like that would be considered exposure or disclosure of a student record.
Right. And we quit doing volunteers, at check in, check out at most of our schools. Some are still went back to do it because a volunteer, saw somebody later in the afternoon. Oh, Stephanie was sick today. I hope she feels better. She checked out early. And it's like, you're not supposed to say that, so you're, that, so that's when volunteers are not supposed to be doing that kind of stuff.
Well, before we go too far into this, Ms. Steiner, are you
waiting for Julie to get her stuff?
Are you saying
Ready.
that we need to hold this?
Well, the changes that were made to policy 8700 to reflect the disclosure. So what happened is that some teachers might be recording an online class to then later share with students who were absent or to reteach or reinforce something. And if students are displayed in that audio or video recording, if it's not a student record, you would have to get consent unless it's considered directory information. And so we revised the policy to include the designation as directory information, certain things that could be used for instructional purposes and limited only. You don't want to make it available to anyone that asks, but you do want to make it available to students in the class. That change I do not see reflected. So I would say we probably need to, pull it or just add that in and have it for first reading.
So I have a question on that. I don't find that 4,700 is inconsistent, but do we want all of 8,700 to now be reflected in 4,700?
I think 4,700 should replace 8,700 entirely.
Okay, then I think, so I did not gather that. because I felt like one was really more related to FERPA, but I get what you're saying. So if that's the case, if they should be combined, I would like to work on that a little bit.
Okay,
Or-
let's go
Or
ahead
have McKenna do
and
that.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, you want to just punt
Yeah.
on this until next meeting? I think that'd be easiest.
Because yes, under H3, you have the definition of directory information, and you've got that in 8700. So
Yep, let's go ahead and pull that one.
Is that good with you, Ms. Kay?
Yeah.
Okay.
So McKenna, is that something that you will pull together, incorporating 8700 into 4700?
Okay, yeah, so the way this policy is written right now, it has photographs or digital images, including still or video images of a student engaged in ordinary school activities. That is currently listed as something that is directory information, but just because it's directory information doesn't mean it can be released to anyone. It says the superintendent is going to establish regulations regarding the release of directory information. At a minimum, the regulations must specify basically who they're going to be released to. So technically the way this is written, it would allow for you to do what you're saying you're doing, but it's much more vague. So if you want to, do you want me to be more specific that you're only going to release the videos to students in the class for educational purposes, or are there other types of videos like, I don't know, and are there other types of videos that may actually be released, like some sort of?
yeah, well, a video of a football game or a school play would be different than a video of students participating and interacting in instruction in the classroom. So
I would feel much more comfortable with Ms. Varnum and Ms. Stagner working on this. I think an issue like this is, I want to be as specific as possible.
and I can take the first stab at blending those two policies and then run it by Ms. Barnum.
Okay.
Okay, so
Thank you.
policy 4700 is on hold until the next.
Since we're sending it back, can I just ask a question about what goes in the cumulative file?
So do you have a specific question, or
I do, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So, because because it came to my mind when we were talking about all this concussion training, kind of things, is that something that, since kids have to say that that's in there, we were talking about, immunization records and all different kinds of things. Is that something that we need to, like, is cumulative record stuff that we pull from Power School?
No. So the cumulative, well, yes and no. Yes, but not exclusively. So the mod 1 includes the health record, and if there's anything related to a medical diagnosis, a head injury or concussion, that would go in there. It also has the immunization records, the health assessments, any of that information. But the mod 1 also, and we have a student records manual. The mod 1 also includes the paper records. It's actually the official educational record, the paper records for enrollment, birth certificate, that kind of thing, custody, any type of custody information. The mod 2 goes into more disability related or MTSS and intervention related information. And then mod 3, not every student has a mod 3. A mod 3 is only created if the items that would fall into a mod 3 need to be there.
Okay, yeah, that's why I was just, because we just talked a lot about concussions. I just was asking, so that's good.
Yes.
No question.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Our next policy on for discussion is policy 4705, confidentiality of PII. Ms. Varnum, this is all you.
Yeah, and this is we don't collect social security numbers of our students any longer, so this doesn't necessarily apply to just students, but I don't have any recommendations on this one.
And this is covered under general statute.
This one is covered, yes.
Okay.
Let me get my.
Mr. Wildebohr, Ms. Craybill?
I'm good.
I have nothing.
Okay. So then we can move policy on for first reading. Our next policy is rules governing confidentiality. Oh, wait, no. Was that, hold on, lost my place. Yes, rules governing confidentiality of PII.
So this is just the regulations piece, and I don't have any recommendations.
Neither do I. Ms. Craybill?
Either.
Good.
Okay.
Good, well, I'm good.
All right, this one might take a little bit of time. 4720 survey of students.
Yes, I had some questions, but I'll let anybody who is on the school staff go ahead and go first, because you might explain it to me.
Well, I was just going to say that this is just honestly the restatement of legal requirements and offering the opt-out options consistent with federal guidelines for different types of programming. So I don't have any recommendations for changing it.
Okay.
I just had a couple questions. When we're down in, because that we have a survey that's going to be coming for board review shortly for Title IX inquiries. It's not a federally funded survey, but it is a survey. And so down in that last paragraph on the first page, where it says that the school system will notify parents at the beginning of each school year of approximate dates of surveys. Does this, would this survey, if it makes it through the board, would that be considered one of those things that we have to put on a next year's calendar, and say we're going to do? I mean, that's our plan.
No, I don't read
No.
it that way.
Ms. Crable, this policy applies to surveys that students are required to complete and that are funded by the Department of Education. But even if it wasn't funded by the Department of Education, the Title IX survey that you're talking about is a voluntary survey. No student in New Hanover County Schools is going to be required to complete it. And at least that was my understanding. If there is going to be a requirement, then we need to have a discussion about that. But a voluntary survey that's put out for the community is not covered by this policy. This is something that a teacher would put in front of a student and require them to complete it.
Okay. Well, further along on that one, my question was going to be more along the lines of the opt-in versus opt-out. So we wanted ours to be opt-out, that we give it to everybody unless you say that you don't want to take it. So that is, I guess, what I'm just trying to figure out, where in board policy do we say that we want it to be all one way or the other unless we ask for permission? Like, which one do we ask for permission for, the opt-in, or do we ask for permission for the opt-out? That's where I wasn't clear in reading this, and that's what I wanted to get that done first, so that when we talk about it from Title IX, we're not going to ask for something that we can't get, or that we're going to ask for something and we have to kind of go through some motions.
So what is the plan for the Title IX survey? It was always my understanding that it was going to be just made available, for example, on the website or something like that, that it's not going to be provided to students in classrooms. If it's going to be provided to students in classrooms, I think that I need to look at the survey and have some thoughts about whether that's permissible at all.
Well, we will invite you. Again, we're not anywhere, we're not ready to do this. It just came out of the subcommittee, we're good with the survey. And so now it has to go to the Title IX committee to talk about, are they good with it? And then to talk about what our rollout schedule would be, or so that we can propose it to the school board. So we're not ready to roll, but we're inching closer. So Julie, if you want to, jump in a little bit too.
Yeah, so opt-in would be where you get permission from the parent for the student to participate. Opt-out would be where all students participate unless the parent says no, thank you. So not speaking on the Title IX one specifically, but this is related to, and I'll ask Deborah and McKenna to jump in as they need to. Opt-in versus opt-out is really based on like mentioned earlier, whether there is Department of Ed funding, so a certain type of federal funding, and it could also be a combined federal funding, such as Department of Justice and then Department of Education. And usually the opt-in is for where you get parental permission is for surveys that are asking about protected information. And that's really, even
Number
information
3 and 4.
revealing about a protected topic.
Number 3 and 4 are protected topics, the sex behavior and attitudes. It's not really sex behavior, but and illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating. There are some questions
Yes.
in our survey that would hit those 2 things. So yeah, so we're not ready to do anything, Deborah, and our next Title IX committee meeting, I'll make sure that you're invited to. It's Monday the 19th of, is that the right day? No, yeah, Monday the 19th, where we're just going to talk about it, in the committee. But our initial discussions based on surveying our team is that we wanted to make this available at the beginning of the school year 21-22 to be administered at school, either in a classroom setting or in a computer lab, and trying to get as many middle school, and we have a separate survey for middle and a separate survey for high school, to try and get as many kids as possible to answer the question. I mean, you certainly don't have to participate. And we can always add in, parents, you're welcome to look at the survey, because it's not like it's going to be private, and it's going to be shared publicly, at a meeting. So it's
what I would say is I don't see anything in this policy that would prevent an eventual survey. I think,
right.
And just in terms of this policy, I don't want to get too deep into the Title IX piece of it, but in terms of the survey of students policy, I don't feel like it would be a hindrance or a burden to anything that the Title IX committee is working on.
The policy as written says that parents have the right to review the survey and will have the opportunity to opt their children out of participating in the survey. So
that's what I just want to get clear on. Take away the Title IX survey. Let's just talk about surveys in general. Is it the board policy that we are usually opt in, or is it the board policy that we are usually opt out? Is it that cut and dry, or do we
I think
have to review every survey?
For my 2 years on the board, it's always kind of depended on the topic and survey.
Yes.
Well,
and
I'm looking at
historically
going forward, yeah,
right. Historically, there's been determination by the board on opt-in for even surveys that are not of protected topics. So I think this is a good discussion, and I think 4720 outlines what we should be doing with regard to regulations, and it's going to be different. Some are going to need to be an opt-in versus an opt-out. For data collection purposes, of course, it would be simpler to have opt-out, but from protected information perspective, we have to have opt-in so that parents have the opportunity to protect their child's information. So it has to be that balance, and so it can't be one or the other.
Julie, I'm not seeing in this policy anything about opt-in, though.
Yeah, I didn't either. The only thing I saw was the very last line on page 1, where it talked about, that's the only place I saw opt-in even mentioned, or opt-out even mentioned.
So this appears to read that, and I haven't looked back at the federal regulations, but this appears to, even if it's a protected topic, the opportunity is to opt out, not to opt in.
So I have in my notes, parental opt-in for Department of Ed funded surveys that reveal information concerning protected topic.
Right. I'm clear on that.
Yeah, but I don't, I'm looking
Most
in the
of our
wording of
surveys
this one.
aren't federal surveys, are they?
Right, no.
What about just a regular old climate survey? Is that considered an opt out? When you're not asked, I just didn't know if we even needed to make that broad stroke, or if we make the statement. I think we need to make a statement somewhere that says it's on a case by survey situation, and that means the board's going to have to get
So
involved
there's-
in a lot of surveys we don't need to be involved in.
So this is really talking about protected topics and then collection for marketing purposes. So it doesn't really go into climate, such as what the work we've done with the Middle School Eyes Project, which is really a school climate project. This policy really doesn't reference that because that's really a part of an instructional process. But this policy is really talking about the protected topics. And the first part, it doesn't mention opt-in, but that's the obtaining parental consent of a parent or eligible student before participation. That probably should be otherwise known as opt-in. And then but then I'm looking at the bottom and it seems to, if I look at my notes on one side and then I look at the last version, I am getting a little confused now. Parents have the right to review, yes, but parents will have the opportunity to opt their children out of participating surveys, which is kind of inconsistent with the first line. But the first line is really speaking just to Department of Education funded surveys. So I think the big question on the table, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the big question on the table is whether the board wants to have an opt-in for not just Department of Ed funded surveys, but also for protected topic surveys. Or would you rather have an opt-out for non-Department of Ed funded protected topic surveys? Did that make sense?
Yes, and that was my question.
That is the question, and I think that's what you guys have to decide.
So do we need any wording to explain that better? Because it is kind of, you've talked around it and gotten to understand what I was trying to ask.
No, I guess what the language that I would think might be appropriate at the very bottom is non-Department of Education funded surveys, or surveys not funded by the Department of Education, but that include protected topics, will be evaluated by the board on a case-by-case basis as to whether or not they are best suited for opt-in or opt-out participation, or something to that effect.
And so the first sentence really does say that, but it doesn't, it just says that we'll notify parents. But if the board wants to make a determination on those surveys on a case-by-case basis, then I think that should be included.
I would be more.
Is the board going to approve every survey though?
Right, I don't want to do that.
No, but that's why I said, I think the board should approve opt-in, opt-out if it covers protected topics, but is not Department of Education funded. Because all of those topics, their political affiliations, mental or psychological problems, sex behaviors, attitudes, et cetera, all of those topics, it's rare, I think, that we're going to survey one of those independent of a Department of Ed funded survey. And so I think the board would, yes, but overall it's rare. I don't think we'll be doing that on a weekly or bi-monthly basis. So I think that would be an area where the board would want some say.
And going back to Ms. Crabill's question, if the Title IX survey is going to be presented in classrooms, then it would fall under, because it's a protected topic, it would fall under that last paragraph, and it would have to be notified. Parents would have to notify at the beginning of the year.
Yes.
Okie dokie. So that's good to know. All right.
Okay, are we changing anything in that paragraph?
Yeah, are we changing anything?
It's based on whether, as Mr. Bollier was stating, the school board will determine for surveys concerning protected topics that are not funded in whole or part by the Department of Education, will determine if those are opt-in or opt-out on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, I would feel comfortable with that language, just given those topics.
I agree.
What, would there ever be an occasion that you would say that a survey about sex behaviors or religious practices should be opt-out instead of opt-in? Because otherwise you might just want to say all protected topic surveys need to be with prior written permission, whether they're DOE funded or not.
And there too, if that's what, yeah, I'm fine there.
Okay, yes, that just seems like it's going to be much harder to get information that because surveys are supposed to be just for gathering information so that we can make our school system better. Like, what Julie was talking about before, change behaviors of, students and or staff. So, yeah, I don't want any of our surveys to be hindered because parents are afraid to answer questions or let them
I agree with you, but I'm really hesitant to cut parents out of some of these.
Oh no, I don't.
issues.
Yeah, I know.
It's
So,
a delicate balance. It's a delicate balance on protecting very sensitive and confidential information and trusting that remains confidential, and then having a statistically relevant set of data to make decisions on. So there's a delicate balance there.
Yeah, I would prefer Deborah's language.
All right, so long story short, we can bring whatever we think from this committee, to the board, because the board ultimately, we're just 3 people. And all we're doing is presenting it to our partners on the dais, and then the whole group will decide what this means. But the conversation needs to be kind of getting clearer, because we're ready to do our survey, but there's tons of other surveys I shouldn't say tons. There will be other surveys. And so I just think that we need to make sure we're all clear on that.
Yeah, I definitely, like I said, I mean, I don't know, Mr. Wildebohr, what you think. I prefer
Pete, weigh
Deborah's
in.
language.
Yeah, I do see the delicate balance. I think it is important that we get as much information so we can make, rational and fair decisions going forward for the best of all the students, but we also want to protect the students. I mean, I think opt-out would be my personal opinion. That way the parents do have the right to opt their child out. But if they choose not to, or if they don't really care, then we have more, more information to go with. Well, that's my thought.
The
I'm just-
only danger with opt out is if we have families that might not consistently respond or be able to respond in a timely manner, and might intend. So you're going to end up capturing more data with an opt out, but it might not be because it's a passive consent. I just think that should be considered. I'm not offering one direction or the other. I just want that to be considered.
I think if we give them enough, number one, we tell them about the survey at the beginning of the year. We give them enough information and enough, ability to respond, and we make that very clear. I mean, that's they have the option to opt out, and if they choose not to, then I don't know. That's my thought.
So let me ask you this question: is the sex education that we teach, in 5th grade and in middle school, where we have everybody come together, or parents can come to family nights and learn about the curriculum, is do things like that help us decide if we should have an opt-in or an opt-out? Like, the more education we give to parents so that they will want to have their kid participate?
I would lean on Dr. Smith for that one.
Is she still there?
Because family life education falls,
Under her, yeah.
right.
And I was just using that kind of as an analogy, like we do it with family life. We do it with, transition services, for our EC kids. I mean, there's all kinds of nights and meetings and things that we can have people understand. And again, parents are going to get to see our particular survey, in the full public light, as we talk about it at a board meeting. So it shouldn't be any,
Right.
surprise, but
It sounds like there's a consensus for the opt-in. Like I said, I mean, if the two of you want to do the opt-in, then that's 2 against 1. I would,
right. So
I would just caution, like I said, the parent piece is,
no, parent piece is important.
I'm just saying that, but, if you guys are wanting to do the opt-in, we'll do that.
So does opt-in mean that I have to get permission, and
Yes.
opt-out means that I just do it unless
I'm sorry, the opt-out,
Okay.
Yes.
Who you guys
Actually,
prefer?
I don't know if you misunderstood me, but I said I was more in favor of the opt-out than the
Yeah, I'm
opt-in.
sorry, I misspoke. Yep.
me too. I said, isn't opt-out meaning that you have to say that you don't want to do it?
Yes.
Okay. All right,
So,
so that handles, perhaps this level, but as a school board in general, do we want to say that across the board? Or do we want to just use the wording that says case by case? Because if we're going to follow what Deborah just said about we have to get on the list, if we're for any survey, that means that we have to plan pretty much all of our surveys that we want to do in the summer so that we can have it ready to roll and post it online. Or is there a way that, because it says beginning of the school year, so we don't have much latitude on that. So is that, and this is required by law, right? We have to do that?
McKenna, is the beginning of the school year notice required under the PPRA?
I would have to look. I know that notice is required. I'm not sure that it's that specific. I don't know.
If it's not that specific, I would recommend that it say at the beginning of the school year or with reasonable notice at the beginning of a new project. Because it could be that sometimes we learn that we have, for example,
A grant in the middle of the
a
year.
grant through the school climate, national school climate, and we may want to then alert parents that there will be a survey as a part of that that may relate to bullying behaviors.
Yeah. And because we could maybe even say beginning of each semester, because then you do it at the beginning. But I like yours better with the new initiative, because we don't know when we're going to get that stuff.
Mhm.
So it doesn't look like we have to actually make any changes. I mean, for the
yes, we
opt-out
do.
piece, because it
We
says
have
parents will have the opportunity to opt their children out of participating in the survey.
I'm not talking Title IX. I'm talking about this policy.
So PPRA says the LEA shall directly notify the parent at least annually at the beginning of the school year of the specific or approximate dates during the school year. So yeah, the federal reg requires it to be you have to at least notify them at the beginning of the school year.
So can we say at the beginning of the school year, and with reasonable notice at the beginning of a project? So if we do an additional one,
You have to do it at the beginning of the school year though.
okay.
Oh, so we're not allowed, the law says we're not allowed to pick something up midstream?
Not if we would have to do the protected information notification of survey at the beginning of the year.
Okay, so
So
that's
we'd
just-
have to,
so again, it's
we'd
all
we'd have to be careful about
only
that.
the protected stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
So are we keeping it as written, which is the opt out, correct?
Yes,
Yes. Opt out means we get to do it.
yes.
Okay,
And-
yes. I say keep that in.
And so they will not, so these will not need to come to the board for determination on opt-in versus opt-out. It's opt-out generally. Yes?
Yes. And if
Yes.
you
Okay.
want it to be opt-in, then you would bring it to the board.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I just want, that was the main thing out of this
Okay.
survey that I wanted to know, because we
Okay.
talk about it all the time.
All right, so is everybody good with moving 4720 on for first reading at the next board meeting? Not
Yes.
tonight's board meeting.
Yes, whew, sorry.
All right, we have 5 policies to go here, and 2 of them are reviews. So,
We only have 3.
well, we have 2 reviews. We wanted to bring back and discuss the seclusion and restraint room. Ms. Barnum had a couple of recommendations there.
Well, maybe we can just skip to that one and then and just get those done.
I could make these fast because they've already been reviewed.
Yeah,
If you would
I
like.
say let's do that if we can. Do you mind, Nelson or Pete?
Would you want to jump down to the last 2?
I would, because they're the most important.
Well,
Okay,
I can-
rules.
They're
Well,
all
they're all
important.
important.
They're all
important.
important. Sorry, they're all.
I can
important.
make 8120 and the student assignment plan and the 4302 and 4302R very quick.
Okay,
Great.
Where are we starting? Tell me where to start.
Let's just start with 4302.
okay.
Okay.
4302R.
So page 2, I would like to go under let's see.
Ms. Farnham, I'll just briefly remind the viewing public, this policy was passed at our last board meeting, and we have just decided, or you have just decided to recommend some changes.
Yes, I think within, thank you. Within this policy, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, we can have policy that's written specifically on general statute, but I'm making a recommendation that we not have all that general statute allows, that we are more specific with what we as a school system allow or stand for. And so my recommendation is to align more with our practices and our training of our staff. So I would want to draw us back to 4302R, which are the rules. Yes, and go under number 2. So number 1 is physical restraint. Number 2 is mechanical restraint. And so scroll a little bit further because I want to talk about A, B, C, D, and E right there. Mechanical restraint of a student as we train is permissible within New Hanover County Schools only as A, aligns, and B, aligns. In New Hanover County Schools, we do not train, and within the Student Support Division, we do not train and we do not allow C, D, and E. So we do not use mechanical restraint in an effort to obtain weapons or dangerous objects. We do not use mechanical restraint for self-defense, and we do not use mechanical restraint to ensure safety of others. That falls under physical restraint as a last resort. But not mechanical restraint. So my recommendation would be to remove C, D, and E because they are not within New Hanover County Schools practice or planned practice. And I'll just add as a behaviorist, I disagree with them.
I would agree, and
I
actually,
agree.
I agree completely.
Can we also not include? Yeah, I guess maybe this definition, the paragraph or the sentence below it. But would we ever tie or tape a child? I mean, so
No.
I guess that's to define what mechanical thing is, but I don't think we've ever, I mean, it's like that person at the board meeting said, well, that means you could tape a child. We would never tape a child, but.
But that sentence does say it's prohibited.
Right.
So tying, taping, and strapping is not considered a reasonable use of force, and its use is prohibited.
Right. Okay.
So I think that statement of prohibition should stay, but should be understood that it's a statement of prohibition.
Right. Good point.
All right, I'm totally good with that.
Yep.
If you guys are, we can move it. That policy will go on.
The only other thing that I had a question about was, do we provide training, Julie, on this whole topic? Where
Yes.
like when to use, how to use, when to call and back up, who can use it? I mean, is there training on
Yes.
that?
Yes, all staff receive the basic training on verbal de-escalation because our training isn't everybody gets trained in physical restraint, because quite honestly, you don't need to use it if you're not
Right.
trained in it. And we don't want everybody trained in it because you don't need to determine whether you should use it or not.
Okay.
Physical restraint is only used by a trained team in each building, but every staff member should understand the verbal de-escalation process, because that's all of the intervention work in de-escalating a crisis incident. And then if that's not working, you call in your team that has a more in-depth training that includes that verbal de-escalation and also any physical therapeutic intervention that might be needed to preserve safety of the individual or others. And that's just to as a last resort and in order to get into a safe space.
And
So
someone is using it and they're not trained, there's documentation that goes in their personnel file.
absolutely.
So-
And we have one of our trainers or two of our trainers, depending on the situation, that will investigate improper use of seclusion and restraint. And if it doesn't follow the training protocol that we have, not just broad general statute, but if it doesn't follow our more precise training protocol, then that is a personnel action, as Dr. Faust said. Yes.
So,
Can I ask you one more question?
I'm-
And like I said, I might be.
Kate, I'm talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. You were-
I want to finish up on that.
Okay, you keep
Sorry,
going.
I'm being a boss. The,
Yeah.
so can we include some of that, some in our policy about the specific training and, and disciplinary action if we're going out of that? Because we have used that in other policies that, up to and including, something with employees, but I think we need to be pretty clear on that. Can we add words around that?
Well, it might be that it can go in that first sentence. The following rules will govern the use of seclusion and restraint. Well, although we're looking at the regulations and not the policy, but
Right.
maybe that's where this fits better. To add, the following rules will govern the use of seclusion and restraint by school personnel who are designated and trained.
Yes,
And
I would like
So
some.
my question, my pushback for that would be, again, would be writing that policy. However, if we've already told individuals in the school district, if you're not trained, you shouldn't be doing any of this.
Yeah.
So actually having to tell others, like, I get it that it's like, well, people need to know, but
So
we,
I'd agree with Dr. Faust. I totally agree. And also we did pass this last month. It was good last month. So
Ish.
I wouldn't change it too much outside of this part of the presentation. I agree.
I just want you to know that Julie's team, when we do this, and all principals know about the restraint holds, they're familiar with it and they know who's in their building, who is on the team. It's usually their special needs team, someone who's on there to get that training. There's a little card. There's a way that they're trained. They have their card, all those things. So individuals know it. What I'm saying is that when we go back and we review, because every time that you restrain a child, you have to fill out paperwork.
Right.
You can't just say I'm going to restrain and do the 2-man hold or the 1-man hold and not write it down. It has to be reported. And so then if you aren't trained in it, then there's a whole nother ball of questions that actually place through that. So I think this allows us to govern it, but the practice on the other side, believe me, we are very strict on that, because you can hurt a child if you do it the wrong way. And again, that's a last resort. The de-escalation is the part, and I believe we need to do, everybody needs to be in the de-escalation class to hear it.
Yep.
So it doesn't
And they do.
resort to this. But this is like when you actually have to put your hands on someone and you don't put your hands on them if you hadn't been trained.
And agree, to clarify, all staff go through the verbal de-escalation training every year. And we do not use a locally created training. We use an evidence-based crisis prevention institute model. An international model.
All I wanted to state in a policy, or I'm not quite certain I understand the difference between the code and the policy, other than one is policy that the board sets and one is what you guys do to meet the requirements of the policy. I just want it stated, I feel like we should have it stated somewhere that says that we provide training, we don't have to go through all the details of what you've just said. And I'm glad that I'm hearing that, and anybody else who's watching. But I just think I think we need to be specific that we provide training to operate with what we just said. And it doesn't have to be specific, and, so we don't, put ourselves into a box. But I just feel like we need to say that we're going to train, because that's what we've done in many other policies. I mean, we're training on concussion, so we're not going to train on how to, restrain someone.
I do think that there should be some reference somewhere to the fact that, certain seclusion and restraint cannot be used except by trained personnel. And I don't think you need to put in this policy anything about discipline, because I think that would come under the employee discipline policies. If there's going to be a statement that says, if you violate board policy, then you are subject to discipline, et cetera. But I guess the only question I have is if you have a teacher who's in the hallway and a fight breaks out and they're, having to grab the student before they hurt another student, that's technically a physical restraint. Julie, is that teacher? I mean, do all teachers get training? I would hate to punish a teacher for grabbing a student before they pummeled another student because they didn't have training on it.
Yes, so they all get training not in the physical response, the therapeutic physical restraint, but they all get training in that verbal de-escalation piece and the articulation of the Greenblatt Act, which used to be known as House Bill 1032, and I'm still always going to refer to it that way. But you're right. They have an obligation, because general statute does say they have an obligation to quell a disturbance and to prevent injury. And so staff do have to, if they feel like they can do it safely, they do need to intervene and shouldn't be held accountable from a disciplinary standard in protecting students.
Didn't I read that somewhere?
The CIP is more for student, and I always refer to in the students with disabilities or behavioral issues, something of that nature. We don't typically, I mean, if you're trained to use it and there's a fine thing, but it's kind of hard to, because of the training is different. And the only reason I know that is because I'm trained, well, no longer, my card is expired and I'm not trying to do the CPI restraints at all.
I'll put you in the next course.
No thanks. No thanks.
So that would be my only concern about requiring training, because there are circumstances where physical restraint has to be used by a school employee, and it's just spur of the moment because there's an immediate emergency where someone could be seriously hurt and they have to step in.
Can we
But
write
again,
that?
I would say that if somebody does restrain a child who is not, qualified to do so, that's a violation of our policy already. Whether we put that in here or not, it's a violation of our policy.
Unless it's a situation as Deborah just
Yeah. And
Yeah.
is it
And if
possible
I
to say that and quote that and cross-reference to the Greenblatt thing that you legislation that you referenced? Can we just put that in there?
it already is.
And I thought I read it, but I couldn't find it when I was going back through.
Right. I still refer to it. See it in the cross-reference. It must be in the policy, which I didn't pull the policy back out.
Okay.
It's probably just has the general statute number, not like the House Bill 1032 anymore.
Okay. Oh, here's the
All right.
policy
Ms.
43.
Crable, if you're done, I'm just going to ask a quick question. Ms. Crable, are you done?
I am, Pete. Thank you for asking me, Mr. Wildebohr. I'm sorry that I stepped on your toes.
Not a problem. Just real quickly, I noticed that in the isolation section, it talks about a student being reasonably monitored, but the seclusion where we're actually keeping that child in, maybe behind a closed door or something, is not mentioned there. And I'm wondering why that is.
I
obvious-
noticed that too. Yes.
Thank you.
Are we on?
Well, I'm looking at, 4302R,
Mhm.
section 3, seclusion. It doesn't mention anything about, needing to monitor the child. And obviously, if the person's standing at the door, but it doesn't say they need to be. But and then you go down to 4 in isolation C, it says the student is reasonably monitored, which I don't know exactly what the definition of reasonably monitored is, but in isolation. But seclusion is even more restrictive, and it doesn't say we're monitoring that child there that I can see. Maybe I missed it. I'm sure we are. I'm not saying we're not.
Right. We are consistently monitoring students in both seclusion and isolation. So I don't think we should say reasonably monitored. I think the student is consistently monitored in both of those.
I like that.
Okay.
But I think we need to add that to 3 then also, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Oh, number
Oh,
3,
can I
it
add
does say
something?
it. E number 1 on the top of page 3,
Top of page 3.
right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
All right, I missed that. Yep, you're right. Thank you.
And could I add something
Yeah.
to
Yes, yes,
that?
yes. Okay. I don't know why I didn't see that. I apologize.
Well, I had those highlighted for the reason that one, you're monitored in close proximity, and then the other one, it's just reasonably monitored. So I didn't know what the difference was in that.
Was able
Yes,
to
it-
scan his. Yeah, no, I like that. Thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, I did miss that.
I'd like to add something to that if I can.
Sure.
All right, sorry, but in our seclusion rooms, and that's consistent with the general statute, the way they work is when that door is closed, it is always unlocked. When you push that door too, it is unlocked. The only way you lock it is someone has to stand there and hold there's a paddle instead of a door handle, and you hold that paddle down. And that's the only way that you can secure the door. If you leave the door is open, and there's a window in there so that someone has to be there holding the paddle down to secure the door and monitor a child that's in seclusion.
And I think that's such a great point, Eddie. I think we should on seclusion take off by locking hardware, because we don't have hardware that locks. You
Good.
have
Okay.
to hold the handle for it to be a lock, so it's not a locking hardware.
So it'd be more like prevented from leaving by securing the door or something like that.
Yeah, or just prevented from leaving.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, I mean, but it does say or other means. So I think it's, I don't know that you need, I mean, technically locking hardware would mean the paddle, that would be locking the door. It just means you have to hold it.
I would rather it be specified to, because I agree with what Mr. Anderson is saying.
But
Because
Julie,
I don't want
think
it to be misunderstood.
this is a definition of seclusion. And so what you're saying is if you put a student in a room and prevent him from leaving by locking the door, that's not permitted except under these circumstances. What I wouldn't want is someone to say, well, it's not in the policy, so it's permissible. And maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way, but
Yeah, I just don't want it to be misunderstood, that doors can be locked and unattended.
so,
Because the only way it can be locked is if it's attended and held.
yeah.
And again, these really are few and far between, and these are not consistent situations. These are not routine situations, and these are almost exclusively, other than a crisis situation, listed on a student's therapeutic plan. So I do want to mention that too. I thought this could be fast. I'm sorry. Maybe prevented from leaving by hardware locked when held. Can we do that, please?
That works.
Yeah, I agree with you, Julie. Just the whole connotation of locking the door will send some parents, into a little bit of heartburn.
Yeah.
Sure.
rightly so.
And I understand that, Julie, you're completely, but so the definition of seclusion is if you physically prevent someone from leaving by locking the door. Seclusion is not allowed except under these very specific circumstances. So, I mean, I think it implies you are not allowed to lock a student in a room.
Right.
And so I would be, rather than talking about technically what you have in your school with your hardware is just physically prevented from leaving, period, rather than trying to tweak the language of the specific type of hardware. I just think that gets too confusing, and it implies that other types of locking might not fall within this prohibition. And I wouldn't want to leave any ambiguity that would allow someone to make that argument.
Julie, could you put monitored in front of seclusion in that second paragraph? To get to what you're saying, I mean, whether it's hardware or not, our system requires it be monitored the whole time.
Yes, and that falls later in that section, but I do think that, I mean, I don't think it's inappropriate to put
Well, again, I just think
yeah.
you say seclusion is this big thing. We are not going to allow seclusion, anything that falls under that umbrella of seclusion, unless it meets every single one of these specific criteria. It's reasonably needed to respond to control of a weapon or maintain a fight, and any of those things. And the student is monitored, the student's released as soon as the behavior stops, the confining space has been approved. So it has to be either A, B, C, D, or E, and plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, again, just reading it. So if you say monitored seclusion of a student may be used in these circumstances, then you say, well,
And unmonitored not.
Because monitoring is in there as a requirement. I wouldn't want to, again, I
So
don't want to create any ambiguity.
So could we take out the word locking or in hardware? So just physically prevented from leaving.
There you go. I like that.
Okay. That's all I had on that one.
So can someone explain to me just really quickly, what is the difference between, as far as legality, I guess, goes, the difference between 4302, our policy for school plan for managing of student behavior, versus 4302-R, rules on seclusion and restraint? I mean, why do we have to call out it separately? Why can't 4302-R be part of 4302? I'm just not clear on, I want to be clear on going forward because I've seen it a couple times and I just sort of like followed in step.
So the ones that are our intent was that they're just regulations and they don't need to be adopted by the board. They can be maintained by the superintendent. It was just information that we wanted to make sure you had, so we provided it. But your board, as I understand, actually did adopt it. So it's part of your policy manual. I mean, but the reason it's an R is because we sent it to you just as a sample regulation that was intended to be part of the policy manual.
No,
But-
and I don't mind that it's there. I just wasn't quite certain, because some of the things we were talking about, like when Dr. Faust was mentioning about training, I didn't quite follow where he was talking about it. But when you look over in 4302, it does talk about we're encouraged to implement a system of positive behavior support and to seek positive this and that. So I was thinking that our policy says we're doing it, and this is just kind of telling us how. Is that how it works? Or telling us one way how, not the only way how? Is that Julie, is that right?
Yeah, I think we have further kind of detailed it to be more explicitly how,
Okay.
but yes, I think in general, yes.
So did we talk about 4302 or did we just skip to 4302R?
It's the
It-
same thing.
It's the same.
It's all, so it is all one big policy.
It was on here together because 4302R is only in existence because of policy 4302. And so policy 4302 was listed so that we could talk about 4302R. But we don't need to talk about policy 4302.
All right.
And I'm good with
Good.
R if you guys are.
Yeah.
4302 is already adopted, right?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm cool. Thank you.
Okay. And 8120, and I believe that this will, I believe that actually took us through the rest of, yeah, we are done with the exception of 4700, we are done with this section, I believe. So 8120, Ms. Barnum.
Okay, again, I'll try to be quick. I will try to be quick. So in the 8120 is the policy for having our student assignment plan. And so I would like to move straight to the student assignment plan if possible. Which would be that last bullet or the last one. No, the other document, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, specifically on our student assignment plan, I would like to draw your attention to page 4, assignment to a school. And I want to give you just a little bit of background as we go there. There's been an understanding that students who are approved to attend signature programs at the traditional high schools, such as IB at Hoggard, Lyceum at Hanover, STEM at Laney, and Marine Science at Ashley, when they live out of that attendance zone, that they're approved under open choice to attend that school because they've been accepted into the signature program. But it's been understood that if they decide to leave the signature program, that they need to be assigned back to their district school. Because the only way to get to outside of open choice, and that means that you've got, that there's space. So the only way to get into a school where they're over capacity that's not in your attendance zone at a traditional high school is to be a part of the signature program. So if I live in the Hanover district, let's say my high schooler wants to be at Ashley as a part of Marine Science, my kid needs to get into Marine Science in order to go to Ashley. If my kid is not, and if Ashley's overcrowded, then my kid can't be at Ashley otherwise. So the understanding is that if you leave the signature program, you need to be assigned back to your district school. Otherwise, it's a kind of a loophole or a backdoor to get into a school that might be over capacity and not maintain the commitment on how you got there. So for a manner of kind of managing student assignment and capacities and open choice, I am recommending that you consider under assignment to a school, and this is for, in all fairness and equity purposes, that paragraph A, where it says a student will be expected to attend the magnet or non-magnet school or year-round school. And I think we should in that put attend the magnet, non-magnet school, comma, year-round school, or
program, signature program.
well, with this one, it should be early colleges to which the student is assigned in the lottery. And then So you're expected to attend if you get into a magnet or non-magnet or year-round or early college. The next thing, so which student is assigned in the lottery. And then I would recommend adding a sentence. Students assigned to a high school signature program outside of their zone school must remain in the signature program to maintain enrollment in that assigned school.
I think that's excellent. I think it will cut down on some of the work that we do when we hear appeals. Because I know this has been an issue. So I appreciate you bringing this forward.
Julie, does early college high schools, is CTEC included in that?
So I'm thinking we could include, I think technically could be so cooperative.
Innovative high schools?
Yeah, I think we could say early college and cooperative innovative high school.
So what is the process for employees? Meaning, let's say a teacher is at one school and he or she wants to bring their child with them.
So that would be under the employee benefit.
Okay, want to make sure.
But
But they still have the options.
Yeah.
They still have the options to use every student assignment option, but then they still have employee benefit. And then there's also an employee hardship process, which does not require, because employee hardship just has to be an inconvenience, where hardship otherwise is a greater level, greater standard.
So kind of along that same lines, Julie, if you go to page 6, which is under definitions, and we're talking about lottery schools. Are the specialty programs, are the signature programs considered lotteries? Lottery schools?
No, they're
schools.
right. They're application based.
Okay, so would there ever be a time that a student got accepted into the signature program but was not allowed to go to the school because it was too full or anything like that?
No, the signature program is open by qualification. And so, no, we use that to help balance out. We balance out the capacity with the size of the signature program.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
But the size of the signature program could impact any number, whether there's a number of open choice options. Because if their signature program is large and they go over capacity, there will not be open choice options.
Okay. Does this student assignment plan change every year?
It is updated every year, just to make sure that we cover the appropriate number of schools. There doesn't necessarily have to be change every year. We just make sure that it includes all of the information on which schools need to be included. So it doesn't have to be. We do change the year to make sure it is known to be current.
So
we review it every year and make changes as necessary.
Okay, on letter I, section C, it says open choice requests are submitted no later than April 16th, 2021. That's why I asked that question, because it's pretty specific to this year. So you'd have to review it to change it every year, right?
We set the timelines every year, yes.
Okay. All righty. And there's a typo in section I, letter B. I'm going to do with Julie. It's an A request, not an request.
Where are we?
Section I, subsection B. It's on page 8. It's just a tiny little typo.
Mm-hmm.
Letter B.
Oh, thank you.
All right.
And is that called pulling a Julie? I like it.
Because you said it first a couple weeks ago, or a couple things ago. So I'm like, all right, well, if Julie could do it, I could do it.
Thank you.
All right.
That's all I had.
All right.
Julie, I don't have that. So can you send that then to Kim to get?
Yes.
Okay. Last piece of the update puzzle, public records, retention, release.
So this is, I know that the time for the committee is ending in about 4 minutes. This is a long conversation about this. And
I don't know, not with our group. I think we can get through quick.
And I don't see anyone from communications on here, and I really think they need to be a part of the conversation. So because it did come at their request, I've been talking to Brandon Shope quite a bit about this policy, and I'm supposed to talk to your new communications officer on Wednesday. So maybe we just put this.
I don't even have the policy number. What is it?
It's 5070.
I don't even see that one in my packet.
I don't have it either.
I don't think we had it in our packet. It was,
I emailed it.
Yes,
It's posted. I don't know if you got a paper packet, it was not in it. I asked for it to be posted on Assembly.
Okay.
But
we can hold that.
we can hold that till next time.
Ever respectful of everybody's time. I know that we have a board meeting in a couple of hours. I'm sure you guys want lunch and everything. So I have absolutely nothing else. I would ask over the next couple of weeks. I don't know. I feel like there's even as things are opening up, I feel like there's a real benefit to having these policy meetings remotely because we all have our own notes and our own papers. I didn't know if there was an appetite to meet face to face again. If there is, please just notify me by email. Otherwise, I kind of like having it this way, but I'm open for that discussion. If there's nothing else from anybody else at this time, I will entertain a motion to move policies 4125,
35?
what's that?
4135?
35, 4220, 4230, 4240, 4250, 4260, 4270, 4400, 4705, 4705R, 4720, ahead for first reading.
Did you say 8120?
I did not. I'll come back to those.
No, I thought we were going to move it forward.
8120 and 4302 are not on for first reading, the revisions, so they'll go directly to the board for second reading.
Okay, sorry.
Do I have a motion?
Yes. So moved.
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Yes.
The policy committee is moving those policies on for first reading and saying goodbye, almost goodbye to the 4,000 series, thank God. I will also entertain a motion at this time to move policies 8120 and 4302, revised policies. 8120 and 4302 are forward to the board for second reading.
Also 4210.
Right.
I'm sorry, thank you.
So moved.
And seconded.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wildebohr, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Those policies will be up there for second reading. And at exactly 12 o'clock, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, with apology for yelling at Pete.
There's a motion and
No
a
problem.
second with an accompanying
With an apology.
Any discussion? Okay, Mr.
I
Wildebohr,
accept,
how do you
thank
vote?
you.
All right, we have an acceptance. Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I am yes. We are adjourned with our thanks to McKenna. Thank you very much, Ms. Barnum. You've done a great job through all of this. Mr. O'Brien, thank you very much. And we'll see you all shortly.
We'll see you in
Yeah.
4 hours.
Yep.
Thank
See
you,
you
guys.
soon.
Drink
Thanks,
energy
everybody.
drink.
Yeah, really.